Chapter 767. When Cursed Wrist Hassan heard the word, as expected, it sounded rather impressive. As expected of His Excellency Villo. Although I didn't use the aura concealment technique, His Excellency Villo was able to discover me in advance from such a distance. Cursed Wrist Hassan complimented Wu Ming. You're too kind. His Excellency Cursed Wrist also said that you didn't use the aura concealment technique. It's normal for me to discover you, Wu Ming responded to Cursed Wrist Hassan. After complimenting each other, it was time to get down to business. Since you came back alive, that means you've succeeded, right? As if responding to Wu Ming's words, Cursed Wrist Hassan tapped twice on his skull-masked face. Yes, thanks to His Excellency Villo, Sir First Hassan didn't do anything to me. Cursed Wrist Hassan's tone was quite grateful. Then, Cursed Wrist Hassan stretched out a hand with something in his hand. Taking a closer look, wasn't the thing in Cursed Wrist Hassan's hand the small box that Wu Ming gave him? I'll return it to you, His Excellency Villo. Cursed Wrist Hassan handed the small box to Wu Ming. However, Wu Ming just smiled. Keep it. Maybe it'll be useful in the future. Cursed Wrist Hassan was taken aback, then nodded. If that's the case, I'll accept it. Cursed Wrist Hassan was not a pretentious person. Since the other party said he would accept it, then he would accept it. By the way, where are Tachika and the others? Are they still behind? However, after Wu Ming finished speaking, the roar of the aircraft entered his ears. Then, Wu Ming searched for UFO and saw it. Wu Ming was shocked. What the hell is this? Hey, Villo, did you miss me, the genius? Da Vinci opened the hatch, quickly walked out, and greeted Wu Ming. Gadotsi, on the other hand, seemed to be carsick. She was already lying on the platform in front of the passenger seat, twitching non-stop. How did you make it? Wu Ming asked. This is a flying machine made from the ores I found on the road. Although it can only accommodate 2 people, it is a genuine flying machine. Da Vinci proudly introduced his masterpiece to Wu Ming. The corner of Wu Ming's mouth twitched. Building a car out of pure wood and a flying machine out of ore. As expected of Da Vinci. You might as well change your name to Thomas Alva Da Vinci. At this moment, a black shadow appeared in the surroundings. Seriously, isn't it too perverted to sit on this thing? The person who came was none other than Hassan. At this moment, Hassan had taken off his mask, and the angry expression on his face was clearly visible. Originally, Baihui Hassan was about to reach Dongji village when a strange, big bird suddenly jumped out from behind and almost hit Baihui Hassan. Not only that, this big bird also robbed Hassan of his second person to reach the village record. It was really abominable. What's more, there were 2 people in this big bird. Doesn't that mean that I'm actually the 4th? Furthermore, the one sitting inside was that smiling Da Vinci. That smile was too similar to that of the angel who bullied her. It was really infuriating. At this time, Matthew's voice also came. Senior. Matthew quickly ran into the cockpit and carried out Gadotsi, who was carsick. Putting the unconscious Gadotsi on his lap, Matthew looked at Da Vinci. Da Vinci, what's going on? Da Vinci smiled embarrassedly. Oh, didn't my Da Vinci number 2 get repaired, updated? The speed increased a bit too fast. Don't worry, I set up a safety device. Tachika-san just fainted. However, Matthew couldn't say anything. He could only hold back his resentment and take care of Gadotsi. Sir Villo. At this time, Bedivere also arrived. Lucius, thank you for your hard work. Wu Ming greeted Bedivere. However, Bedivere shook his head. Just call me Bedivere, Sir Villo. I have already told Chaldea my identity. Wu Ming suddenly realized and then nodded. It seemed that something had happened that made Bedivere open his heart. TSK, I already felt that you were a Knight of the Round Table. Hassan looked unhappy. It seemed that she still had a lot of resentment against the Knights of the Round Table. But seeing that she didn't do anything, it seemed that Hassan also understood that resentment shouldn't be vented on allies. Senior Villo, you and Mr. Bedivere really hid it from us. Matthew said with a little temper. Sorry, but even so, I still think it's better for Bedivere's identity to be explained by him. Wu-Ming apologized with a smile. And Matthew was just joking, so she agreed with Wu-Ming's words. On Chaldea's side, monitoring Gadatsi's body, Roman couldn't help but complain after hearing it. I thought it was strange at the beginning. Why would Lucius be friends with the Villo? It turns out that it's the relationship between Bedivere and the Villo. Hearing Roman's voice, Wu-Ming frowned and asked. I suddenly feel that your complaints are so weak. In Chaldea, the doctor's back was gray. By the way, doctor, when will Senior wake up? Matthew asked with concern. Gadatsi waking up as soon as possible is the most important thing for her at the moment. It should be fine in a few minutes. Roman looked at Gadatsi's physical data and replied to Matthew. Matthew breathed a sigh of relief. A few minutes, it's not a big deal. In this regard, Wu-Ming spoke. In that case, let's go to the house and wait for a while. Just in time, we can start the battle plan again. The servants looked at each other and nodded. Soon, everyone came to Gadatsi's residence, which was referred to as Chaldean Embassy. By the way, Wu-Ming brought Quiet Hassan, who was rescued, and Tang Sanzang and Kuroto Ta, who were brought back by the way. Just then, Gadatsi woke up. Matthew, I seem to see my deceased grandmother waving to me. Mashu was so scared that she didn't know what to do. What? Senior, you have to cheer up, Senior. Wu-Ming laughed involuntarily. Well, Tachika, there are new partners here. Don't bully Matthew like this. After Gadatsi woke up, Wu-Ming introduced Tang Sanzang and others to Cursed Wrist and others, and then began the battle meeting. First of all, report your situation in Azrael Temple, Tachika. Chapter 768. Yes. Gadatsi stood up and saluted. After explaining the details, Gadatsi summed it up in one sentence. After successfully arriving at the Azrael Temple, we passed the trial of the first Hassan. After showing the token you gave to the first Hassan, Cursed Wrist Hassan was fine, and the first Hassan said that he would help Chaldea save humanity. That's all. Very well, since the assassin agreed, then he will definitely help us at the right time. We don't have to pay attention to this for the time being. Wu-Ming nodded with satisfaction. Sure enough, after the first Hassan saw that he was here, he made a big promise. Helping to save humanity was not just helping to save the humanity of this singularity. If the last singularity, which was the Mesopotamia singularity, had the help of the first Hassan, it would be a great help. By the way, Villo Senior, what happened in the village last night? Matthew raised his hand and asked. Mordred found this place and launched an attack. In the end, because of excessive overdraft of the spiritual base, she left. The village was slightly damaged, and no villagers died. Wu-Ming reported quite concisely. Mordred. Gadatsi thought of the Mordred in the London singularity. Don't be sad, the servant is just a clone of the heroic spirit. The Mordred in this singularity is not necessarily the Mordred you met. Because she is the Mordred I met. Wu-Ming added in his heart. She betrayed the king when she was alive, but she can't see the traitor this time. It's really ironic. Wu-Ming shook his head silently. However, Mordred has left after all, which saves you from not being able to kill her. Sorry. Matthew and Gadatsi said in unison. Wu-Ming waved his hand indifferently and continued to speak. Then, let's move on to the main topic. Wu-Ming became serious. After looking around at everyone, Wu-Ming opened his mouth. Everyone, I plan to attack the holy city tomorrow morning. Everyone exclaimed in unison. Isn't this a little too early? Hassan asked tentatively. Indeed, and I think it's a little rushed. Cursed Wrist Hassan nodded. Actually, it's not fast at all. Wu-Ming shook his head and continued. When I was rescuing Serenity Hassan, I met a Gwawan. Hearing this, everyone's heart froze. I'm afraid he's already guessed that I've teamed up with the mountain people and will be on guard against us. That's why I'm suggesting an immediate attack tomorrow. I see. The best defense is offense. Cursed Wrist Hassan nodded thoughtfully. That was what Wuming meant. If they attack tomorrow, the other party might not expect Wuming and the others to attack so quickly. That would catch the other party off guard. Of course, in addition to that, there was another reason. The village has been discovered by Mordred. Who knows if she has already asked the Knight of Solemnity to send a message to the Holy City. However, with Mordred's temperament, it was unlikely that she would make such a delicate decision. The possibility of Mordred not having any Knight of Solemnity following her was too small. In addition, Lancelot also told Wuming that Mordred had a small number of Knights of Solemnity. Therefore, if Mordred's Knights of Solemnity did not show up, it was more or less possible that they had returned to the Holy City. Or rather, it was more reasonable for her to order the Knights of Solemnity to, "Don't follow me. I want to start ravaging alone." After that, all the Knights of Solemnity returned to the Holy City. After all, that was Mordred, wasn't it? Assassin, do you mean that the Holy City might strike first and send the Knights of Solemnity to attack us? Gadotsi asked thoughtfully. Wuming nodded and added. That's not the worst. The worst should be the Lion King's Holy Lance. Arash suddenly said at this time. Am I right, Your Excellency Villo? Wuming nodded. The Lion King's Holy Lance is tied to the mist anchors on both sides of the planet. Even if it's ordinary power, it's not something an ordinary servant can handle. If it's the true name Liberation, it won't be a problem to launch an attack from the Holy City. Wuming said something rather terrifying. If the Lion King knows our location. Matthew said lightly. Then aren't we in danger now? Gadotsi continued Matthew's words, looking shocked. So, everyone is busy packing up and moving now. Arash pointed outside the window. Not only that, because some of the buildings in the village were destroyed, and because of the aftermath of me and Mordred, many houses are already in danger. The combination of the former and the latter, leaving is the best way. Well, but, where can we go? Cursed Wrist Hassan thought. Let's go to the West Village, Wuming said. My village? 100 Faces Hassan was shocked. But, Your Excellency Villo, the West Village is indeed not far from the East Village, but that's only for us. It's impractical for the villagers to move there en masse. Cursed Wrist Hassan was not trying to undermine Wuming's plan. If it was a few villagers moving, it would be fine, but this time, the villagers were moving en masse, and the difficulty had increased by many times. However, Wuming did not find it difficult. Don't worry. My ability, the portal, allows me to connect two places I have been or seen at will. There is no time limit, and I can set the size of the portal myself. So, it's not difficult for the villagers to move en masse. Yeah, I forgot that Assassin has this ability. Gadotsi clenched her left fist and hit her palm. After moving the villagers of the East Village, we can start preparing in advance. After everyone sleeps for a night, I'll use the portal to teleport everyone over the next morning. If Aguawan was here, he would definitely scold Wuming for cheating, because Wuming had entered the Holy City and walked around once. Of course, if the Lion King's Holy Lance was still maintaining the light film, Wuming's portal might not be able to pass through. So, it would depend on the situation when the time came. Question: why don't we attack at night? Quiet Hassan, who had not spoken much, spoke up. Wuming did not even need to answer this question. Gadotsi and the others were very clear about this question. It's all because of Gawain, Gadotsi and Matthew replied in unison. Chapter 769. As people who had witnessed Gawain's power, Matthew and Gadotsi still remembered it clearly even now. The Knights of the Round Table were all given different blessings by the Lion King with the Holy Grail, and Gawain's blessing is everlasting. As the name implies, as long as he is around, it will always be daytime, Wuming explained. Therefore, even if Gadotsi and the others chose to attack at night, Once they arrived at the holy city and encountered Gawain, it would become daytime because of Gawain. As the gatekeeper of the holy city, Gawain basically would not leave the gate of the holy city. Therefore, the probability of them encountering Gawain was 100%. Therefore, Wu Ming said that it was better to wait until the day to attack. Then there's no other way. Hassan expressed that he understood. After the villagers are relocated and settled, we'll use one night to recharge and prepare for the attack at dawn the next day. Everyone nodded and then began to move the villagers. First, they gathered the villagers who had already packed their things to a slightly open area in the village. Then, Wu Ming walked to the center, waved his hand, and opened a black-purple ripple. However, this ripple was only the size of a person. Immediately afterward, Wu Ming looked at Baijiu Hassan. Bai Qian, come with me first. After all, that was Hassan's home ground. It was not a bad idea to let Hassan return to the West Village to make arrangements. Hassan nodded. She was not stupid. On the contrary, she was very smart, so she naturally understood what Wu Ming meant. She walked to the portal, adjusted her mentality, and walked in first. Immediately after, Wu Ming looked at cursed wrist Hassan and the others behind him. I'll expand the area of the portal later. At that time, you can start to arrange for the villagers to go in. Cursed wrist Hassan and the others all nodded. Then, Wu Ming pounced forward and entered the portal, his figure completely disappearing. In the blink of an eye, Wu Ming came to the West Village that he was familiar with. I'll inform the villagers and let them get ready. After Hassan finished speaking, he left Wu Ming's side as if he was escaping. It seemed that Hassan was quite unwilling to be alone with Wu Ming. After shrugging his shoulders, Wu Ming also left the portal. He was ready to head to Abante. Because Abante was hovering vertically over the West Village, it was not difficult to find. Wu Ming came to the monitoring room in Abante and sat down. Speaking of which, this chair is really comfortable. Wu Ming patted the sofa chair he was sitting on with a comfortable expression. Translator, WQL editor, Alim as if it wanted to make Wu Ming more comfortable. Two wooden tentacles stretched out of the floor and started to massage Wu Ming's shoulders like two hands. Wu Ming didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Alright, Abant, I appreciate your kindness. Speaking of which, where's Gilio? The moment Wu Ming finished speaking, a virtual screen appeared in front of Wu Ming. The picture on the screen was Gilio. At this moment, Gilio was playing in the nearby mountains. It couldn't be helped. Gilio was unlikely to be with the monkey, and other than the village, there was no one else here. So, Gilio could only entertain herself. This guy. Wu Ming looked at Gilio who was playing with a soul-eating beast that Wu Ming had seen once. Wu Ming showed a helpless expression. Gilio, can't you see that demonic beast is about to cry, gate? As Wu Ming chanted the spell, a black-purple ripple appeared beside Wu Ming. At the same time, on the screen, a black-purple ripple appeared below Gilio who was playing with the demonic beast. Gilio naturally fell into the black-purple ripple and let out a rather cute sound. Ugh, Gilio appeared from the teleportation door beside Wu Ming and sat on the ground. Master, are you back? Just as Gappo finished speaking, another black shadow fell out of the portal that had yet to close. It fell straight into Gappo's arms as she sat on the ground. Oh, my little cutie, have you followed me too? Gilio smiled and stroked the soul-eating beast's eyeless seaweed head. Then, the soul-eating beast opened its mouth and didn't dare to make any sound. As a demonic beast, it had its own instincts. Its instincts told it that this guy who had been playing with it wasn't someone to be trifled with. The person sitting on the chair over there was even more so. It felt like it was in the stomach of a certain creature and the surrounding ground and walls gave it a strong sense of crisis. Then keep it and play with it. Remember not to let it run around. It won't do if it hurts someone. Wu Ming wasn't too concerned about the frightened soul-eating beast. Yes, thank you for your magnanimity, Master, Gilio said to Wu Ming with a smile. Then, Gilio came to her senses. By the way, Master, why did you suddenly come back? Gilio turned over and sat on the soul-eating beast's back, swaying her legs. The East Village has been exposed. The villagers of the East Village will move over later. Looking at the villagers of the West Village who were gathered by Hassan on the screen, Wuming explained to Giliel. By the way, did anything happen while I was away? For example, did the West Village expose its location? Of course not, Master. Abant's monitoring ability is very strong. It has monitored everything within a kilometer of the village. As long as it finds anything unusual, it will tell me. Wuming nodded. After thinking about it carefully, he realized that something was amiss. In other words, Abant has been doing things these days, and you have been playing? In an instant, Giliel broke out in a cold sweat. No. How could that be, Master? I also patrolled around the village, ahahaha. Just kidding, I didn't expect you to do that. Although Wuming was right, this sentence still made Giliel a little sad. But it was just a little sad. She would be fine after playing with this soul-eating beast. With that thought in mind, Jillian looked at the shivering soul-devouring beast beneath her. This made the soul-eating beast, which sensed the danger, tremble even more, but it couldn't do anything. The powerful aura around it made it dare not move at all. Just when Wuming decided to expand the portal below, a new image suddenly appeared on the big screen. A knight with a magic bow and long red hair came to the surroundings of the West Village. Tristan. Chapter 770. Wuming and Tristan were both Knights of the Round Table. The two of them had met not long ago, so Wuming definitely wouldn't recognize the wrong person. Why is Tristan here? Wuming muttered to himself, puzzled. Tristan was clearly imprisoned at the bottom of the pyramid by Ramses II, so why would he come here? Although there was a possibility of impersonation, Wuming felt that there was another possibility, and that was, Ramses II had released Tristan. It would be fine if he was an impersonator, but if he was released by Ramses II, then it would be a great disadvantage. Just like what Ramses II told Wuming, Wuming couldn't be sure if Artoria would attack him with the Holy Lance when the singularity was about to be repaired. Similarly, Wuming couldn't be sure if Ramses II would stab him in the back at the end. After all, if Tristan was released at this time, it would obviously disrupt the normal progress of Wuming and the others. Tristan, who had received the reverse blessing, was very powerful. He was no longer sad and was no longer afraid of poison. Using the invisible vacuum blade to kill could be said to be incomparably cruel. When he was stabbed in the back by Wuming, it was only because Wuming took advantage of Tristan's unfamiliarity with the enemy's intelligence. Wuming relied on Tristan not knowing that Wuming had that teleportation gate trick, so he directly used that teleportation gate to severely injure Tristan. If Tristan were to go to the village now, perhaps no one would be his match. No, Bedivere said that his arm transformed from the holy sword had the ability to restrain and weaken the Lion King's blessing. If Bedivere was here and everyone attacked together, it shouldn't be a problem to force Tristan to retreat. However, Wuming wouldn't let Bedivere suffer so much. Bedivere's body was already riddled with wounds, and every time he used the power of the holy sword, it would aggravate his injuries. Let's go, Giliel. Wuming stood up and opened a new teleportation gate. This was a portal that led directly to the surface. It would be too slow to fly over. Yes, Master. When Tristan's figure appeared on the big screen, Goprel stood up from the Soul-Eater beast's back, or rather, flew up. She could tell that Tristan's sudden appearance had disrupted Wuming's plan. As Wuming's weapon, Tristan naturally had to solve the problem for his master. The master and servant walked into the teleportation gate, leaving the shivering soul-devouring beast alone in Abandi's body. Vaguely, the floorboards began to wriggle as tentacle-like wooden roots quietly approached the soul-devouring beast. Wuming exhorted Giliel as they arrived at the portal on the ground that was connected to East Village through the portal. Someone will come later. Remember to look here. Understood, Master. Giliel turned around elegantly, scattering a few feathers. Nodding, Wuming waved his hand, and the portal that could only accommodate one person instantly widened. It could now accommodate more than a dozen people at a time. Then, I'll leave for a while. Opening a new portal, Wuming walked in directly. Where did Wuming go? Wasn't it obvious? He went to look for the rare Tristan that appeared in the wild. On Tristan's side, he was almost at West Village as he pursued the traces of humans. But for some reason, he kept walking around West Village as if he couldn't find the way to West Village. However, no one would believe that a knight of the Round Table couldn't find the way to a mountain village. Suddenly, a voice came from behind Wuming. Long time no see, Mr. Tristan. Tristan slowly turned around. So it's Lord Villo. I didn't expect you to be here. Tristan didn't look surprised. That's right, the one who spoke was Wuming, who came behind Tristan through the portal. Wuming wasn't surprised by Tristan's question either. He casually released his magic and shattered the vacuum trap around him. The impact of the vacuum explosion sent rocks and soil flying. Wuming flicked the dust on his hand and looked at the place where Tristan walked. Seems like you've set up quite a few vacuum traps, Tristan. It can't be helped, Lord Villo. I don't want to feel the pain of being stabbed in the back again. As expected, setting up a vacuum trap behind him was to prevent sneak attacks from behind. But, you've also set up traps so that the villagers can't escape. Seems like you're quite confident. As long as one looked at it with confidence, one could see that Tristan had set up a lot of vacuum traps in places where it was easier to walk. He even set up a few vacuum traps in places where it was difficult to walk or even impossible to walk through. The vacuum trap Wuming triggered was at the level of a normal person. In other words, as long as a normal person touched the vacuum trap, they would be instantly shredded into pieces by the vacuum trap. Because of the strength of the trap, these traps were useless against Wuming. However, it was a good choice to act as Tristan's detector, like before. Didn't the Sun King lock you up? How did you escape? Although Wuming didn't sense the master-slave contract he established with Tristan, after meeting him, Wuming was sure that the Tristan in front of him was the real Tristan. Or is it the Sun King who let you go? Whether it was the Sun King or the Lion King, it wasn't difficult for them to come into contact with the contract in Tristan's body. However, Tristan seemed to have learned his lesson after being questioned by Wuming. He just smiled and didn't say anything. Who knows, Lord Villo? He also gave Wuming a shrug. Wuming couldn't help but frown. Judging from Tristan's reaction, it should be the latter. In that case, I'm afraid you won't answer questions like, have you ever returned to the Holy City, or, have you ever sent any news back from this village? However, only Tristan responded to Wuming with a smile and the vacuum blade from Tristan's weapon. Bang! The vacuum blade clashed with Wuming's sword and let out an unprecedented ear-piercing sound. It seemed that Tristan came prepared this time. What a pity, Tristan. Wuming shook his head slowly and pulled out the meteor silver that floated in front of him from the golden ripples. Come on, Tristan. Chapter 771. At this time, many people gathered in East Village. Gadotsi and others also encountered the enemy. In the corner of the periphery of the village, Gadotsi led a group of servants to hide. Arash, Tang Sanzang, and Da Vinci stayed in the village, responsible for guiding the villagers into the portal, so only Gadotsi, Matthew, Idata, Bedivere, Cursed Wrist Hassan, and Tranquil Hassan came here. Gadotsi quietly poked her head out, and found nothing, so she retracted her head. After that, Gadotsi began to complain about her watch. Doctor, are you sure your detection is not wrong? It's true, it's true. I have detected a large amount of magic power approaching you, but I don't know why you can't find it. Roman, who was sitting in Chaldea's monitoring room, complained. There is another possibility, that is, the enemy has a way to hide, Cursed Wrist Hassan said in a low tone. Is it the enemy's assassin servant? Matthew said subconsciously. It may also be Castor. After all, Mr. Roman detected a large amount of magic reaction. The number of the enemy can't be small. Bedivere also said his own analysis. Sir Roman, can you detect how far away the enemy is from us? Cursed Wrist Hassan looked at Gadotsi's watch communicator. It's about 300 meters, Roman replied. 300 meters. Cursed Wrist, who had the modern knowledge given by the Holy Grail, naturally knew how much 300 meters was. So, Cursed Wrist Hassan observed the terrain. My village is built halfway up the mountain. It's extremely hidden. If the enemy is still 300 meters away from us, they shouldn't have come up yet. That might be the reason why they didn't see the enemy. So, what should we do next? After all, Cursed Wrist Hassan was a local, and asking him at this time was the best solution. Gadotsi wouldn't force herself at this time. After testing the direction of the wind, Cursed Wrist Hassan came up with a plan. At this time, we have to rely on tranquility, Cursed Wrist Hassan said and looked at Tranquility Hassan. Me? I understand. Quiet Hassan was taken aback, and then he understood. Tranquil Hassan actually had a very low opinion of himself, so when Cursed Wrist Hassan leaned on him, Tranquil Hassan was actually at a loss. However, after sensing the direction of the wind, she understood. However, Gadotsi, Matthew, and the others, who were not familiar with Quiet Hassan, did not understand. Tranquil Hassan's body fluid is highly toxic. It can evaporate with the wind, and the current direction of the wind is downwards. Cursed Wrist Hassan did not finish his explanation, but Gadotsi and the others understood what was going on. As long as Quiet Hassan sweated and let the sweat evaporate, and then the highly toxic sweat would be passed down with the wind, it could achieve the effect of silently killing people. Coincidentally, Tranquil Hassan has a kind of footwork that is specially used in conjunction with his poison. After Cursed Wrist Hassan finished speaking, he looked at Tranquil Hassan who had already walked forward. It's called the Silent Dance. Everyone followed Cursed Wrist Hassan's gaze and looked over. Tranquil Hassan began to dance. It was a very simple dance. As long as one remembered a few simple footwork, even an ordinary person could perform it. However, the main function of this dance was not its difficulty, but its ability to quickly make the dancer sweat. Gradually, Tranquil Hassan's body began to sweat. A cold wind blew, and the poison invisible to the naked eye was carried away by the cold wind from Tranquil Hassan's body to the bottom, which was the direction where the enemy was expected to appear. At the end of the dance, a large amount of deadly poison was evaporated into the air below by Tranquil Hassan. It's over. Tranquil Hassan took a breath and said to Cursed Wrist Hassan and the others who were hiding behind him. Now, all they needed to do was wait. I hope Sir Arash and the others can hurry up. Cursed Wrist Hassan prayed. In East Village, Arash shouted loudly. Everyone, speed up. Faster, faster. Along with Arash, Tang Sanzang and Da Vinci were also arranging and directing the villagers to enter the portal. I hope there are no accidents on Sir Villo's side. Arash looked at the portal worriedly and said slowly. The scene changed to Wu Ming and Tristan's side. Boom! As if the atmosphere was about to explode, the symphony bombarded Wu Ming's sword and made an explosive sound. And Wu Ming's magic power was also like free, crazily releasing magic power as sword aura. Boom, crack. Tristan dodged a few magic sword auras as light as a swallow, and the sword aura hit the mountain, causing it to explode. This made Wu Ming frown in displeasure. With West Village nearby, Wu Ming could not increase the amount of magic power released. If he accidentally blew up the village, it would be terrible. And as an ADC, Tristan naturally chose to distance himself from Wu Ming. And because Tristan's attack was not as exaggerated as Wu Ming's and only used vacuum attacks, he was not afraid of blowing up the village. Rather, Tristan wished that he had the ability to blow up the village above, but unfortunately, he didn't. However, this was beneficial to Tristan. Although it was inconvenient to move in the mountains, it was the same for both sides. However, Wu Ming was afraid of the slightest thing, but he could let go of it. Moreover, he was already on guard against Wu Ming's portal. Tristan dared not say that he could defeat Wu Ming, but he was sure that Wu Ming would not be able to defeat him in a short time. It seems that you've really set me up, Tristan. Wu Ming wasn't a fool. He naturally saw that everything around him was disadvantageous to him. You can't blame me for this, Sir Villo. Tristan replied with a smile. It was impossible to tell that he was a ruthless character who had accepted the reversal. But, aren't you mistaken? Wu Ming said softly. Wu Ming had never been a Villo. On the contrary, the Villo had always been him, always been Wu Ming. Then, let the second round of the game begin. Wu Ming said and suddenly flew towards Tristan. This gave Tristan a fright. Flying was a dream for ordinary people, and it was the same for knights. Because without magic, it was impossible to fly. And Tristan was a knight, so naturally, he had no fate with flying. I forgot that Sir Villo isn't an ordinary knight. Although there weren't many knights who could use magic, it didn't mean that they didn't exist. Wu Ming was the most mysterious member of the Knights of the Round Table. The fact that he knew magic had spread throughout the Knights of the Round Table. Wasn't the portal the best proof? Tristan scolded himself for underestimating his opponent. However, the most important thing right now was to deal with Wu Ming, who had flown in front of him. Chapter 772. In East Village, Gadotsi and the others were still waiting for the enemy's attack. By the way, which force will the enemy be this time? Gadotsi chatted with boredom. We, the mountain people, have a grudge with both the Sun King and the Lion King. It's the same over there, but I think it's the people from the Holy City. After all, Ramses II's men were all Sphinx, and it was not convenient for them to move around in this mountainous area. Is that so, the people from the Holy City? Gadotsi nodded, and when she thought about it, it was indeed the case. However, at this moment, a few screams and panicked voices suddenly came from below. Someone must have been poisoned. Gadotsi and the others were overjoyed. However, it was followed by more screams and panic, which meant that the enemy was really attacking. To be honest, Gadotsi would rather it was Roman's instrument that was wrong, but the fact was right in front of her. The enemy was attacking. It should be the people from the Holy City. Cursed Wrist Hassan seemed to have heard the sound of the armor and said with certainty. However, this had nothing to do with what they were going to do next. Although I don't know how many people there are, the enemy's troops are in chaos because of the poisoning. This is a good opportunity. A light flashed in the eyes of the skull mask on Cursed Wrist Hassan's face, and it looked quite strange. Although Cursed Wrist Hassan looked quite scary at the moment, what he said was very reasonable. Take advantage of his weakness. Asterisk cough cough, asterisk there was no need for Cursed Wrist Hassan to remind them to seize the opportunity. Gadotsi and Matthew, who had experienced 5 singularities, had already mastered a high level of combat literacy. However, just when Gadotsi was about to speak, Itatata spoke first. Let me do it. As the only archer here, I should take the responsibility of long-range sniping the enemy. Putting down his rice bag, Itatata stretched out his hand, condensed his magic, and a bow appeared in Itatata's hand. But, Your Excellency Ito Toda, I remember. Tranquil Hassan clearly remembered that Ito Toda did not like to fight. Why would he volunteer himself? I don't like fighting, but I won't back down. That would be a disgrace to my name. After saying that, Itatata knocked an arrow on his bow and released it with a swoosh. Then, a scream was heard. Ah, as expected of the ancestor of martial arts. You managed to hit the enemy with just a casual swing of your sword. Roman praised in Chaldea. Immediately afterward, Roman discovered many individual heat source reactions from the monitor on the big screen. In the end, because the distance was too far, the instrument could no longer detect them. Tachika, be careful. They have over 100 people. Looking at the dense red dots on the map, Roman gulped. To be surrounded by so many people in such a rugged mountainous area, was it a miracle or bad luck? Understood, Doctor. Matthew, get ready for battle. Gadotsi promised Roman, then looked at Matthew. Yes. Sir. Matthew Gillett, get ready for battle. However, a withered arm blocked in front of Matthew. Don't worry, Ms. Matthew. Cursed Wrist Hassan shook his head silently. How can we take the initiative to attack in such a place that is easy to defend and difficult to attack? Immediately afterward, Cursed Wrist Hassan explained the terrain they were now in. The mountain road leading to the village was a spiral road, and Cursed Wrist Hassan and the others were now in the middle of the spiral. Not only were there a lot of stones as cover, but they were also facing the road below. Due to the small population, the mountain road was quite narrow. It was impossible for a group of people to charge up. It could only accommodate a few people. If the enemy passed by here, then Cursed Wrist Hassan and the others would have a headache, but they did not. Then, they were in big trouble. Hearing Cursed Wrist Hassan's explanation, Gadotsi and Matthew immediately thanked Roman. It's all thanks to the doctor. After all, it was Chaldea's instrument that detected the enemy who had not yet arrived. It's all thanks to Villo and Da Vinci. If it weren't for Villo's simplicity, Da Vinci wouldn't have repaired and improved the instrument's strength here. Although that was what he said, he felt that Roman was venting his grievances. Okay, doctor, help us see where the enemy is. Gadotsi comforted Roman, and did not forget to let Roman see the enemy's position. Yes. I'll see. Although it was a little perfunctory, Roman was still very happy. The detection shows that the enemy is at the corner in front where you can't see. It seemed that the enemy was not stupid. They knew that someone was ambushing them in front. It seemed that the enemy was not going to act rashly. Let me do it again, Quiet Hassan suggested. However, Cursed Wrist Hassan rejected it. The enemy is already on guard. I'm afraid it won't be effective. Instead of wasting energy, it was better to wait and see. Our mission is to cover the villagers' retreat. As long as the villagers leave, we'll leave too. Therefore, all they needed to do now was to stall the enemy. Yes, just like how Tristan was going to stall Wuming. However, Wuming was not someone who could be stopped, and Tristan was not someone who could stop Wuming. In other words, Tristan, who was shot to the ground and rolled a few times, spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. Tristan felt that he was too sad. He was beaten by Wuming so badly that he spat out blood again. Facing Wuming, who could use spirit power to fly and quickly approach him, Tristan felt that there was no way to fight this battle. In terms of defense, he was not as thick as Wuming. In terms of attack, he was not as good as Wuming with Holy Sword. In terms of speed and agility, he was not as good as Wuming, who could fly. How could he fight? To be honest, if it wasn't for the effect of the reversed blessing, he would have already left the stage. Because this time, Wuming was going all out against Tristan. In Wuming's view, it was enough to let him go once for the sake of his comrade. After all, if their identities were reversed, he didn't think that Tristan, who had received the reversed blessing, would let him go. He had tried to obstruct him time and time again. Even if he was a comrade, Wuming would not tolerate him, not to mention, Tristan, who had received the reversed blessing, was too arrogant. Looking at that face, Wuming couldn't help but want to beat him up. It's not that I didn't give you a chance, Tristan. I let you make the first move. Wuming looked at him as if he had gotten a great bargain. Thank you very much, Master Villo. With a tough smile on his face, Tristan responded to Wuming, but his smile was still arrogant. It should be impossible to get information from your mouth. Leave, Tristan. With a wave of his hand, the annihilation lock appeared behind Wuming, trapped Tristan, and tied him up like a rice dumpling. The annihilation lock could annihilate magic power, and it was made of magic power. In other words, if the annihilation lock continued to affect the servant could leave the stage. Goodbye, Tristan. Chapter 773. I wonder how Tachika and the others are doing. While putting away the annihilation lock, Wuming looked in the direction of Nishino village. If Tristan's arrival was not an accident, then there might be enemies in Nishino village. I have to go back and check it out. However, just as Wuming was about to leave, he suddenly stopped. Because Wuming suddenly thought of something that can be used. Nishino village, where Gadotsi and others were. Gadotsi and others were still in a stalemate with the enemies below. And because the enemy had charged several times, Gadotsi and others also knew the identity of the enemy, Knight Su Zheng of the Holy City. Every time the person who charged up was wearing Knight Su Zheng's armor. Although there was a possibility that someone else could impersonate him, the probability was too low. By the way, because of Itata's bow and arrows and cursed wrist Hassan and Hyuga Hassan's daggers, those knights who charged were repelled. Amazing, worthy of being a hero of the past. Even though he was now very mature, Matthew still looked at these servants with awe. Whether it was the bow, arrow, or dagger, they all hit Knight Su Zheng's knee through the gap in the armor and forced Knight Su Zheng to retreat. Although he also had the advantage of the terrain, a hero is still a hero. Roman, who was assisting in the battle, knew more than Matthew, so Roman also sighed. That's all I can do. Tranquil Hassan said that she did not feel that she was very powerful. Tranquil is right. We, Hassan, are just people who walk in the dark. In the end, we can't do anything. Cursed Wrist Hassan agreed. Then, Cursed Wrist Hassan looked at Itata, who had his bow and arrow aimed below to prevent the enemy's sudden charge. Sir Itata, your skills are beyond my expectations. Originally, Cursed Wrist Hassan only wanted Itota Sato to deal with Solemn Knight because he was an archer. Who would have thought that Kurodo Ta was so skilled? Cursed Wrist Hassan had never seen Kurodo Ta miss. Basically, every arrow hit the enemy's knee. Huh, Lord Cursed Wrist, you flatter me. I'm just a crude person who likes food. Although he said that, Itafuda actually enjoyed Cursed Wrist Hassan's praise. This was a good reflection that the other party was indeed a boor. Most of the villagers should have moved away by now. We can't keep wasting time like this. The enemy has basically figured out our numbers. Cursed Wrist Hassan was a little worried. Every time the Solemn Knight charged, it was as if the position was predetermined. If Cursed Wrist Hassan and the others attacked, they would gradually expose the number of people who could attack from a distance. If they did not attack, the other party would charge again. And because the other party had groped a lot, the Solemn Knight almost rushed up several times. If it weren't for Matthew and Bedivere to repel the other party when they rushed up, I'm afraid the enemy would have already rushed up. However, because of this, the other party almost figured out the exact number of people on their side again. All kinds of phenomena showed that the other party had a wise commander. As long as he was given a little more time, he would probably command the Solemn Knight to charge up. With this thought in mind, Cursed Wrist Hassan suddenly realized something. How long has it been since the other party launched a charge? About 10 minutes, Roman, who was a combat support, reported. But if I remember correctly, the Solemn Knight's charge is very regular. About 5 minutes, Roman said again. Could it be that the other party has made a new move? Gadotsi also realized the problem. Since the other party has broken the pattern, I'm afraid it's really like what Her Excellency Tachika said. The other party has made a new move. Quietly poking his head out, Cursed Wrist Hassan looked down and found that the other party did not show any signs of charging again. Then, Cursed Wrist Hassan looked at Gadotsi and spoke as if he was asking for a discussion. Let's retreat, Her Excellency Tachika. Staying here now was tantamount to waiting for death. Besides, the villagers of Dongji village were almost done with their relocation. After Gadotsi nodded, everyone immediately began to retreat toward Dongji village. At the corner below, the Solemn Knight lined up neatly on the mountain road. The commander at the front was a knight in purple armor and a girl with brown skin wearing revealing clothes. The two of them were Lancelot and Nidicles. There was no doubt that the magician who helped the Solemn Knight army advance was Nidicles. What's wrong, Lancelot Knight? Aren't you going to charge? The other party might have run away. However, in the face of Nidicles' words, Lancelot just closed his eyes. I know what I'm doing. What a joke. Although his daughter did not notice him, he did notice the other party. It was not easy to find the organization, Wooming, in order to impress his daughter. How could he go against his daughter at this time? If she could say, "You did a great job, Dad," when the time came, he would die without regrets. So, it was fine to drag it out now. Even if the higher-ups held him accountable afterwards, what was there to be afraid of? Anyway, he would have to turn against them later. This was Lancelot's fantasy in his mind with his eyes closed. Nitocles looked at Lancelot with a rather wretched smile with disgust. Obviously, he looks okay, but he actually shows such a smile. It's really disgusting. But it's good not to attack. Anyway, Sir Osmendes only said to help the people of the Holy City. I used magic to bring the other party's troops here, which can be considered as help. In fact, it was not only Lancelot who discovered Matthew through the last wave of the previous charge, but Nitocles also discovered Matthew. However, although it was Sir Osmendes's idea, Nitocles would be happy if she could comply with Sir Osmendes's idea and at the same time ensure the safety of Matthew and the others. Anyway, she was not from the Holy City, and the Lion King had no right to question her. When the time came, she could just push the responsibility to Lancelot. In this way, the two leaders stopped communicating and were in a stalemate. This made the solemn knights suffer. They could only wait here foolishly. It could not be helped. As a knight, the most important thing was to obey the orders of the higher-ups. If something happened, they could just push the responsibility to the leader, Lancelot. It was impossible for Lancelot to betray them. In this way, the solemn knights also relaxed. A large group of people waited here quietly, waiting. Chapter 774. They quickly returned to East Village, and it was Arash who greeted Gadotsi and the others. You're back. Everyone, hurry up and evacuate. The villagers have already retreated, Arash said. Then, let's go, everyone. With Gadotsi's order, everyone passed through the portal and instantly arrived at West Village. No matter what, I feel it's incredible that you can teleport over such a long distance. Villo is really abnormal. Roman, who was sitting in the Chaldea control room, watched Gadotsi's coordinates move to a place far away in an instant, and he couldn't help but sigh. Ignoring Roman, Gadotsi immediately looked at the villagers around the portal. Everyone, let's go. There shouldn't be anyone left behind, right? The villagers all shook their heads, indicating that no one was left behind. By the way, why don't I see Miss Hassan and Senior Villo? Matthew looked around. Other than the few followers and Gadotsi, there were only the villagers of East Village and the villagers of West Village who came to join in the fun. They probably left for a while, but with Assassin's character, she should have left someone to take care of us. Of course, I'm the person my master left behind to take care of you, monkey, you. A rather lively voice reached the ears of Gadotsi and the others. Following that, an angel-like figure slowly floated down from the sky, accompanied by a flurry of feathers. I remember you are Miss Gopril, right? Matthew was happy that he still remembered the other party's name. Although as a monkey, although you called my name directly, you are Master's friends. Sigh. Gopril shrugged and looked rather helpless. If Master finds out that I'm rude to these monkeys, he will definitely hit me on the head. Therefore, Gopril, who chose to follow her heart, suppressed the thought that she couldn't see through the monkey in her heart. Master found something unusual around this village. Combined with the sound just now, I'm afraid there are enemies attacking. Gopril crossed her legs, crossed her arms, and maintained a lying posture, floating in the sky. Since the enemy is attacking, we should go and help Assassin. Then, Gadotsi looked at Matthew. Let's go, Matthew. Your Senior Villo needs help. Yes. Master. With a wave of his hand, Matthew materialized his shield and was ready to go. Master's battle ended long ago. Besides, Master is not a weakling who needs help, Giliel suddenly said. At the same time, he emitted a terrifying aura. The villagers were so scared that they didn't dare to move, and the servants present were also in a state of facing a formidable enemy. Tachika, be careful. This guy is super dangerous. Roman, who was sitting in Chaldea, detected the magical power of Gopril through the instrument. She was no longer an ordinary servant, she was even stronger than a first-class servant. Even if you say so, Doctor, what can we do now? Swallowing her saliva, Gadotsi quietly talked to Roman. Of course, Master likes the weak very much, so I won't do anything to you. As if the prank was successful, Goprel instantly put away her terrifying aura and put on a cute smile. But no one would think that Goprel was a little girl because of her cute smile. You're scaring people again, Goprel. At this time, a familiar voice came through. Wu Ming's figure appeared directly behind Goprel and stretched out a hand and pressed on her head. Master, you're here, ahahaha. The smile on Goprel's face changed again, from a cute smile to a harmless smile, and it was getting stronger and stronger. Remember, don't scare people in the future. However, Wu Ming just patted Goprel's head and didn't do anything to Goprel. Master? In Goprel's opinion, after scaring so many people in such a big occasion, he should at least be punished a little. Without saying much, Wu Ming patted Goprel's head and landed on the ground. It feels like Master is a little unreal. Goprel narrowed her eyes and looked at Wu Ming, who landed on the ground. But immediately, Goprel returned to her original state. Just as Goprel said before, Wu Ming was not so weak that he needed help. Naturally, Wu Ming was not so weak that he needed her, Goprel, to be suspicious of him. After all, even if it was unreal, it must be Wu Ming's doing, so there was no need to worry. Goprel, who thought it through, flapped her wings and flew down. Is 100 Faces Hassan here? After Wu Ming landed, he immediately looked for 100 Faces Hassan. I'm here. 100 Faces Hassan answered and immediately stood out from the crowd. In fact, she had just arrived, which was why she squeezed out from the crowd. You and Cursed Wrist Hassan, settle the villagers down for the time being, find a room, and start the emergency meeting immediately. Looking at Wu Ming's serious expression, 100 Faces Hassan obediently guided the villagers with Cursed Wrist Hassan. After 100 Faces Hassan prepared a house for Wu Ming and the others for the meeting, Wu Ming and the others gathered together. Did you find something unexpected? Da Vinci was the first to ask. In fact, other than some strange things, Da Vinci was quite reliable. I met Tristan nearby. Didn't he sign a contract with the senior Villo, and the senior Villo sent him to the desert? Matthew's meaning was clear. Why did the other party suddenly come here? It's really strange, and as far as I know, Tristan should have been suppressed by Ramses II under his pyramid. However, Tristan came out. And if I'm not wrong, you guys have also met the enemy, right? Wu Ming looked at Gadotsi. Gadotsi was taken aback, then nodded. The timing of the arrival of people from these two villages is too coincidental, so I have to think, I suspect that this is a premeditated joint attack. Immediately after, Da Vinci touched his smooth chin. In other words, you suspect that the Sun King and the Lion King have joined forces. What? Gadotsi and the others were obviously shocked. That's impossible. Cursed Wrist Hassan immediately began to deny it. The Sun King and the Lion King fought for so long, and in the end, because of the stalemate, they were forced to make a non-aggression agreement with each other. I don't think these two enemies will join forces. However, Wu Ming did not agree. There are no eternal enemies, only eternal interests, not to mention. Wu Ming paused and did not say anything else. Da Vinci, who probably guessed it, just smiled and did not speak. The others could not guess. In the end, Bedivere, as a knight of the Round Table, spoke. Maybe it's because they have a new enemy. Chapter 775. I think Bedivere is right. I think so too. The think tank, Da Vinci, nodded and told everyone his guess. Previously, the Sun Monarch and the Lion Monarch fought as equals mainly because the third force, the Mountain Folk, was too weak. Although it wasn't nice to say that, it was an established fact. But now, there's a new force, which is the new force of angels summoned by the Villo himself. Those angels aren't as weak as the Mountain Folk, so they naturally pose a threat to the Lion Monarch and the Sun Monarch. As such, the polarization between the Lion Monarch and the Sun Monarch has collapsed. Although the triangle was indeed very sturdy, it shouldn't be forgotten that although the mountain folk were weak, they were still considered the third force. The sturdy and stable triangle had a fourth force in the middle, which directly broke the stability of the triangle. But in that case, shouldn't the Sun Monarch and the Lion Monarch attack the assassin's angels? Why are they looking for trouble with the mountain folk? Gadotsi couldn't understand this point. Regarding this point, Wuming spoke. Actually, the Skywing species, which are the angels you speak of, are now hovering above the village with Abant. Sigh. Everyone exclaimed and subconsciously raised their heads. Due to the cover of the roof, they couldn't see outside. But even without the cover of the roof, Gadotsi and the others probably couldn't see Abant 10,000 meters above the ground with their naked eyes. However, these people subconsciously raised their heads to express their shock. Before coming here, Abant carried me past the holy city, so it's not unreasonable for the Lion Monarch to know that the Skywing species are here. Therefore, the Sun Monarch and the Lion Monarch teamed up not to deal with the fourth force, or rather, not entirely. They could also wipe out the mountain folk while they were at it. Wait, doesn't that mean that the location of this village is also exposed? Gadotsi was shocked. I'm afraid so. Wuming did not think that the Lion King did not know the location of this village. Even the East Village, which was more hidden than the West Village, had been discovered. There was no reason why the West Village had not been discovered. Although that is the truth, fortunately, Tristan has already left the stage. Holy City has lost another fighting force. This was Wuming's assurance after personally sending Tristan off. Moreover, now that we are all here, and Abanti is still in the sky, even if the Lion King uses the Holy Spear to attack, it won't have much effect. This can be considered a piece of good news amidst the misfortune. Sitting in Chaldea's control room, Roman leaned back and sighed. Things were getting more and more chaotic. Then what should we do now? Should we attack the Lion King directly or change our plan? Cursed Wrist Hassan said as he looked at Wuming, who had vaguely become the backbone of the entire team. Change the plan is certain, but we can't change it at will. After Wuming finished speaking, he crossed his chest with one hand, touched his chin with the other hand, and began to think. Wuming had begun to doubt whether what the Sun King said to him was misleading him. Perhaps, Wuming was completely deceived by the Sun King's, uninterested in anything, look. Why don't we split up? Gadotsi suddenly said. Wuming looked at Gadotsi. After all, Gadotsi had also experienced 5 singularities. She was almost a master who could take charge of the situation on her own. Since she made a suggestion, he had to listen to it. Assassin, you should be able to take your angels to attack the holy city. Then, I will take the remaining servants to the desert to find the Sun King. However, as soon as Gadotsi finished speaking, Wuming denied it. No, you can't beat the Sun King. As long as his shrine is still there, he will not die. Not to mention how huge his shrine complex is, it is not easy to destroy it. Ramses II still has the avatar of the sky god around him. Although Nidicles looked very weak, so weak that she was almost kidnapped by Hassan, she was still a character that could not be underestimated. At that moment, Da Vinci suddenly interrupted. The enemy we encountered had the help of a caster servant. There shouldn't be any powerful caster in the holy city, right? After all, they were all knights. In the face of Da Vinci's question, Wuming answered truthfully. The only person with the potential of a caster is a berserker. Although she can also use the caster's power, from the perspective of her identity, it should be impossible for her to follow the army. So, in the East Village, the caster who helped the Holy City's team should be Miss Nidicles. Matthew felt that he should have guessed correctly. After all, it was a cooperation. The Sun King sent someone, Nidicles, to the Lion King, and the Lion King also sent someone, Tristan, to the Sun King. And it also explained why Tristan came to the West Village near the desert. This was a cooperation, wasn't it? Even if Nidicles is not on the Sun King's side, Ramses II, who has the blessing of the Great Shrine, is not something you can deal with. Even if it was Wu Ming, it would be quite difficult for him to defeat Ramses II with the blessing of the Great Shrine. Even Wu Ming was quite difficult, let alone others. That was why Wu Ming was not optimistic about Gadotsi. There was no other way. Wu Ming had a lot of servants, but they were not elite. But looking at the Lion King and the Sun King, even if their subordinates were dead, they were still very strong. What's more, their subordinates were not dead yet. So, how about we attack the holy city, and the senior Villo go to the Sun King's side? Matthew said. Since they couldn't do it, then Wu Ming should do it. However, Wu Ming shook his head. No, I have something to confront the Lion King face to face, Anne. Wu Ming paused. The Lion King is not someone you can defeat. You may not be able to pass Gawain's test alone. Well. Matthew sighed. What should they do? In fact, Wu Ming had a way. After all, he had already used that, but he wanted to see how Gadotsi would choose. When Wu Ming was at his wit's end, Gadotsi suddenly thought of something. By the way, what about Wang Hasan? When Gadotsi said this, everyone also reacted. Yes, Gadotsi and the others did not go to Wang Hasan to travel, but to ask for help. Since Gadotsi and others returned safely, and they also got the approval of the first Hasan, then the first Hasan would definitely help Gadotsi. Although Wang Hasan didn't say how to help us, he said that as long as we encounter difficulties, he will definitely come to help us. Gadotsi's eyes were quite firm. She believed that Wang Hasan would not go back on his words. But I don't think it will work. Chapter 776. I don't think the first Hasan will be of any help to you in defeating Ramses II. You should know that Ramses II is a man whose head was once cut off by the first Hasan, but Ramses II is still not dead. He relied on his great shrine to reconnect his head and body. What? Cursed Wrist Hasan, Hundred Face Hasan, and Tranquil Hasan were all surprised. Even the first Hasan can't do anything to the Sun King? On this point, Wu Ming did not reply. The first Hasan did not kill people at will, but since he had made a decision, he would listen to the instructions of the evening bell and carry out the assassination. But if the assassination failed, the result would be like now. After the first Hasan assassinated Ramses II once, he would not do it a second time. Wait. Wu Ming suddenly realized a problem. Ramses II, who had witnessed the power of the first Hasan, or rather, Ramses II, who had been warned, should not cause any more trouble. However, he was still causing trouble now. Was he not afraid that the first Hasan would really cut him down? In the face of the crown assassin, Wu Ming did not think that Ramses II, who had an ordinary psionic base, would not be afraid. It turned out that he had been very afraid after that, but now, he was not afraid anymore. Tristan, the mountain folk, and Wu Ming, who had joined forces with the Lion King to deal with Chaldea and the others. In addition, if it were not for the fact that Wu Ming wanted to transfer the villagers at the last minute, or had such a long-distance transfer method, Wu Ming might not have come to West Village at all. Let's make another assumption. If Wu Ming, Abanti, and the Skywing species were not in West Village, but went to East Village where Gadotsi and the others were, then what did it mean for Tristan to come to West Village alone? It meant that West Village would be perfectly wiped out. Tristan, who had received the reverse blessing, had no pity in his heart. Without the existence of Wu Ming, Abanti, and the Skywing species, coupled with Gadotsi and the others who could not support them in time, West Village would undoubtedly be wiped out. The most important point was that Tristan had set up a large number of vacuum traps around West Village. The other party had also indirectly admitted that those traps were used to kill the villagers who had escaped. However, if Tristan knew that Wu Ming was there, he would not have set up those traps because they were completely useless. However, Tristan had set up so many traps. Moreover, when he saw Wu Ming, Tristan said, "I didn't expect you to be here." Although it sounded like a joke, Wu Ming, he felt that it was true. In other words, Tristan wasn't here for Wu Ming. He was here for the mountain dwellers. What's the benefit? Of course, it's the roots. While attacking East Village, which had a lot of combat power, he also eliminated West Village, leaving the villagers who had escaped with nowhere to go. This was a plan to wipe them out. Even if he wanted to eliminate Wuming, it should not be like this, because it was the same to Wuming whether there were mountain villagers or not. There was no reason for Ramses II not to understand this. However, since the other party did not seem to be here for Wuming, could it be for the master of Chaldea? Wuming glanced at Gadotsi. Gadotsi saw that Wuming was looking at her and smiled back at Wuming. Immediately after, Wuming also smiled back at Gadotsi. Wuming thought of a possibility. If that was the case, it would be terrible. Whether it was for this singularity or for Wuming himself, it was quite terrible. But the premise now was what happened to East Village. I'll go out first, you guys stay here for a while. Before Wuming could finish his words, black-purple ripples instantly engulfed Wuming. In an instant, Wuming arrived at the location of East Village, but at this moment, there was no sign of life in East Village. It could even be said that there were no living things in East Village. Instantly unfolding his mental power, Wuming captured the entrance of the solemn night army hidden on the mountain path of East Village. The leader was Lancelot, and Nitocris was also here. Was Da Vinci right? But this was not the point. The point was that Wuming found that the solemn night army had begun to retreat. Although this retreat was somewhat inexplicable, for the sake of Wuming's next guess, Wuming did not leave but waited quietly. Pushing his mental power to the maximum, after waiting for a little while, Wuming felt the fluctuation of magic power. One was from the sky in the west, and the other was from the sky in the east. There were attacks coming from both sides of the sky, and the destination was undoubtedly here, East Village. The thick lightning of the temple collided with the sharp and hot light of the holy spear. It was like a nuclear bomb colliding, combining together. In this Dongji village, Wuming, who had already withdrawn from the range of the attack, saw the two attacks turn East Village into nothingness, and became more and more certain of his guess. Wuming recognized these two attacks. One was the attack of the great temple of Ramses II, and the other was the attack of the holy spear. However, these two attacks were the most powerful attacks Wuming had ever seen. However, such attacks certainly could not be launched consecutively. They should be similar to the kind of attack that accumulated power. Even if Abanti and the Sky Wings were here, facing a real attack, they would not be able to completely protect East Village. Annihilating the West Village and greatly destroying the East Village, it was as if they were trying to exterminate this special human. If all the humans of this singularity disappeared, then there would be no saving, and humanity's salvation would fail. Wuming could understand why the Lion King attacked the people outside the holy city with the holy spear because she had done it before. The holes in the ground were an example. Those in the holy city were good people, so those outside the holy city were bad people. Using the holy spear to slaughter the bad people was equivalent to preserving the purest human beings. However, Ramses II's approach was quite outrageous. However, if the other party was not Ramses II but Gidea's people, then everything would be fine. Gidea's priority was never to kill Wuming, but something else. Wuming was just the most threatening stumbling block for Gidea. Basically, as long as it was a singularity with Wuming, there would be traces of Gidea. In Winter Wood, Floros wanted to attack Wuming, but he was killed by Wuming. In North America, Gidea personally created a few holy grails in order to increase the difficulty for Wuming and Chaldea. In the end, who would have thought that the forces who obtained the Holy Grail were still no match for Wuming, and one of them was even given away for free. And now, at this singularity, the appearance of the Lion King was not Gidea's doing, so his doing should be Ramses II, who previously held the Holy Grail. Although Wuming felt that Gidea should still be recuperating, it was the same to send his subordinates. Therefore, Wuming was guessing whether Ramses II's sudden betrayal was caused by Gidea or Gidea's subordinates. Or rather, was Ramses II still Ramses II now? Chapter 777. Wu Ming did not think that Ramses II was the kind of person who would change his temperament. Clearly, he was fine a moment ago, but in the next second, he directly turned hostile. More importantly, the primary purpose of Ramses II at this moment had become to destroy the singularity and accelerate the collapse of the singularity. Suppose that your task was to kill someone you caught, but in the end, you found that the person you caught was not completely dead, and then someone came to save the person you caught. Then, would you choose to kill the person who was not completely dead, or would you choose to kill the person who saved the person first, and then kill the person who was not completely dead? Of course, smart people would choose the former, so Ramses II also chose the former, directly destroying the singularity. And it just so happened that this choice was also what Gydia was happy to see. As for the Lion King, no matter what her real plan was, she would also be happy to see the destruction of the mountain people. After all, a group of ants building a nest in front of your house, even if they were harmless, you would not like it. The most important thing was that the Lion King needed to collect pure people, and the impure people had to be destroyed. The traces of the Holy Lance's baptism on the earth could also be very good at explaining all this. Therefore, the Lion King and the Sun King began to cooperate. The Sun King released Tristan and let him destroy West Village, while the Sun King lent Nittacles to the Lion King. An army with Castor's magic would definitely be stronger than nothing. If it were not for Chaldea's instrument being indirectly destroyed by Wu Ming and upgraded several times by Da Vinci, perhaps Roman would not have found out that someone was approaching East Village. If that was the case, by the time he found out, the Solemn Knight would have already come to the entrance of the village. Although the Solemn Knight could not defeat the servants, let alone Wu Ming and Wu Ming's Skywing species, he could not withstand the Solemn Knight's many people, and the Solemn Knight could fight a war of attrition. Moreover, the Solemn Knight did not need to wipe out the villagers of East Village. What was the role of the Solemn Knight? There was no doubt that it was used as a foreshadowing, and the real move was still behind. The real move was Wu Ming's nuclear bomb baptism that he saw with his own eyes. The nuclear bomb baptism directly razed Dongji village to the ground. If everything went according to the original plan, Tristan would have already destroyed the West Village by then. Therefore, it didn't matter whether he destroyed the people of the East Village or not. Through this, Wu Ming also understood why only Tristan was loitering around West Village. It was because there was no need to send too many people. Tristan alone was enough. According to the original plan, after the villages on both sides were destroyed, without a fixed residence, the villagers would not be able to survive for long. Don't think that just because you're a mountain dweller, you can live deep in the mountains. It's not like you're a non-human. Mountain dwellers are also human. There must be some who survived, but the number of survivors must be quite small. If the Lion King and the Sun King sent troops to search the mountainous areas, the people of the mountains would definitely be wiped out. Of course, all of this could only be carried out under the premise of going according to the original plan. Tristan being discovered by Wu Ming meant that this plan couldn't be carried out. Even if Wu Ming wasn't in the West Village, Agbont and Gotpril would be enough to make Tristan suffer. However, what Wu Ming didn't understand was how the other side knew that there were only 2 villages in the mountain dwellers. And how did they discover and attack them almost simultaneously? Wu Ming still couldn't figure this out. However, if there were Gydia's people on the Sun King's side, or if the Sun King himself had been replaced by the demon god Pillar, knowing the specific location of the 2 villages wouldn't be too hard to accept. After all, it was Gydia. After obtaining the black soil, the other side was much stronger than before. Moreover, if the original Gydia wanted to replace Ramses II, it wasn't impossible. However, Wu Ming was quite optimistic about this. Looks like Gydia can't sit still anymore. Wu Ming smiled. After all, it was because he was worried that he took action again. However, the other side didn't expect me to discover Tristan. They also didn't expect me to be able to transfer the villagers of the East Village to the West Village. However, if they continued to wait, the other side might make a comeback. This wasn't what Wu Ming wanted to see. As the saying goes, offense is the best defense. Even if the plan of Wu Ming's group was disrupted, because of Wu Ming, the other side's plan was also disrupted. Next, it would depend on who made the first move. Then, let's go back first. Wu Ming said. Gadotzi and the others were probably anxious from waiting. With a wave of his hand, Wu Ming opened a teleportation gate and directly went in. In an instant, Wu Ming returned to the temporary meeting room in the West Village. As soon as Wu Ming returned, Gadotzi immediately pounced on him. Assassin! We have a way to deal with the Sun King. Gadotzi was quite excited, like a golden retriever eager to be patted by its owner. After patting Gadotzi's head, Wu Ming said. Then tell me, what is the way? At this time, the servant who had the ability to solve the problem of Ramses II's shrine stood up. About the great shrine of Ramses II, my noble phantasm should be able to destroy it. Wu Ming took a closer look and it turned out to be a roche. So that's how it is. The earth-shattering strike was sublimated and became a noble phantasm. Although that was what he said, Wu Ming was a little worried. So, what was the price? Was it like the legend where the body was directly torn apart? However, Wu Ming did not ask, and the other people did not speak. Even Roman in the control room did not speak this time. As long as the great shrine is destroyed, the Sun King should not have that kind of powerful immortal ability. At that time, with the help of King Hassan, we can defeat the Sun King. Gadotzi was full of confidence. However, Tachika, you still have to be careful. Wu Ming looked serious. Anyway, the other party is also a top-level servant. It's impossible for the shrine to be destroyed. I will be careful. Gadotzi smiled and nodded. However, Gadotzi pulled Matthew over. And Matthew will protect me, don't worry. Yes. Yes, Villo-senpai, I will protect Master. Although he was a little flustered because of Gadotzi's sudden attack, Matthew still replied with confidence. Seeing such a scene, Wu Ming was almost relieved. Wu Ming took Gadotzi's hand and said blessings. May the root be with you. No one noticed that a strange command spell was attached to Gadotzi's shield-type command spell. Wu Ming's strange blessing made Gadotzi stunned, but since it was a blessing, she accepted it. Right. Gadotzi suddenly thought of something. Assassin, do you know what happened to the explosion and the lightning in the sky? Chapter 778. Of course I know, and this has a lot to do with me verifying whether my guess is correct. Afterward, Wu Ming looked around at everyone. Do you want to listen to my analysis? In this regard, everyone gave the same answer. Of course. Afterward, Wu Ming told everyone about the explosion of East Village, the joint attack of the Sun King and the Lion King, and Wu Ming's own conjecture. Of course, Wu Ming replaced the part about Gidia with the part about the Magic King. After all, in the eyes of Matthew and the others, the Magic King was the culprit. Roman, who was sitting in the Chaldea control room, sighed for a minute. Because Wu Ming had already sorted out his thoughts, he spoke very quickly. In other words, we are now attacked from both sides. Although the situation was very bad, Da Vinci could still laugh. As expected of Da Vinci's kin. After listening to Wu Ming's explanation, Matthew looked incredulous. This is too, the Sun King, who was originally neutral and had indirectly helped them, suddenly joined forces with the Lion King and launched such a powerful attack on them. This not only made Matthew somewhat unacceptable, but Gadotzi was also surprised. Of course, these are just my guesses. No one said that this is right. Wu Ming shrugged. Although Wu Ming said so, but, according to the Villo's logic, this is probably the case. Roman, who was in the Chaldea control room, said regretfully. Indeed, everything that is happening now is basically the same as the Villo's conjecture. It can't be denied even if you want to. Da Vinci still said in a relaxed tone. If the Magic King came in person, that would be terrible. Matthew was quite worried. Don't worry, Matthew, the Magic King can't come in person. Da Vinci's words made him feel surprised. This was what Wu Ming had wanted to say. Da Vinci smiled faintly when he saw Wu Ming's astonished expression. We're just struggling at death's door. If the Magic King wants to wipe us out, he can easily do it. Plus, he said that we can't be considered a threat if we haven't dealt with the 7 singularities. Why would such a proud Magic King lower himself to come here? Geniuses were indeed geniuses. Their understanding was also different from ordinary people. After hearing Da Vinci's words, I suddenly feel much more at ease. Gadotsi patted her chest and took a deep breath. Actually, if one thought about it carefully, this was indeed the case, because that was without Wooming. If not for Wooming, Tristan would not have gone to the Sun King's place. If not for Wooming, the Sun King would not have been suspected of being possessed and betrayed. Wooming felt that these 2 points were very important. If not for him, perhaps Gadotsi and the others would have a smoother time. However, at this point, there were no ifs. Therefore, Wooming was still very worried. Compared to your focus, I'm more surprised that the Ramses II mentioned by this guy has been replaced. 100 Faces Hassan also spoke. After all, 100 Faces Hassan was a Hassan from a village near the desert. Although she did not have a direct conflict with the Sun King, she had witnessed the Sun King's power. He was a powerhouse full of majesty and dominance. This was as shocking as Ah Fu suddenly saying that she was actually a real girl and even showing that she did not have a big treasure. It's indeed a little unbelievable. Cursed Wrist Hassan also nodded. I'm just guessing. The truth can only be determined after seeing the person in person. Wooming shrugged, indicating that he was innocent. No matter what the truth is, all of you need to be 120% vigilant. This was the only point that everyone must be clear about. Understood. Gadotsi saluted Wooming, indicating that she understood. Nodding, Wooming looked at everyone. There's no time to lose. Everyone, let's go now and try to fix this singularity today. Huh? Can it be so fast? Roman was quite surprised. Not to mention rushing, even fighting would take some time. Of course it can be so fast. After all, I'm here. Wooming snapped his fingers. In an instant, a dark purple portal opened under Gadotsi's feet. Ah, senpai, accompanied by Gadotsi's scream and Matthew's wail, Gadotsi disappeared instantly. But then, Gadotsi fell from the portal that appeared above Wooming. However, Wooming carried Gadotsi in a princess carry. Woo woo. You really scared me, assassin. Gadotsi hugged Wooming's neck and acted coquettishly. This made Hassan, who had been quiet on the side, quite jealous. I'm sorry, Wooming said apologetically. He only wanted to make a small joke. And Matthew also breathed a sigh of relief. Phew, senpai is fine. Senpai Villo, don't make such jokes in the future. In the end, Matthew puffed up his cheeks and looked at Wooming rather angrily. If Lancelot was here, he would probably have a nosebleed. Wooming thought so. Then Wooming put Gadotsi on the ground, walked to Matthew, and put his hand on his little head. I'm sorry, I won't be so sudden next time. Forgive me, my dear junior. Okay. Matthew nodded with a flushed face. He couldn't help it. Wooming's smile was too lethal. Gadotsi immediately ran over and separated Wooming and Matthew, and hugged Matthew protectively in her arms. Okay, don't bully my Matthew, really. Although that was what she said, Gadotsi actually had a coquettish look on her face, which was quite pleasing. Well, can we get back to the topic? As an honest person, Cursed Wrist Hassan raised his hand. Wooming smiled awkwardly, and then became serious. As you can see, I can connect the places I've been to. I've been to Ramses II's Grand Temple, so I can create a passage that leads directly to the vicinity of the Grand Temple. Wooming had been to Ramses II's place, so there was no problem in building a portal here. Everyone nodded in agreement. Everyone was quite satisfied with this direct home invasion move. But at this moment, Cursed Wrist Hassan asked again. Don't you need to leave a few servants here? I'm still worried about the safety of this village. If they all left, what if the enemy attacked again? This was also very likely. Direction, Abant won't leave. Wuming pointed to the sky. Cursed Wrist Hassan did not speak, and seemed to be thinking. Don't worry, Cursed Wrist, that big guy is still very reliable. As Abant, who had guarded the village for a while, Hundred Faces Hassan was quite satisfied with Abant. Since Hundred Faces Hassan said so, then okay. Cursed Wrist Hassan compromised, and the last one to speak was Gadatsi. As the master of the servants, she began to cheer them up. Good. Then everyone, the final battle is about to begin. Chapter 779. After that, everyone was divided into two teams. Gadatsi, Matthew, Cursed Wrist Hassan, Hyuga Hassan, Tranquil Hassan, Arash, and Kudo Tai Chi were in one team. Wuming, Bedivere, and Gazril were in the other team. Tang Sanzang, on the other hand, stayed behind in West Village because he did not have any combat strength. Although I can't help, I will pray to Buddha to protect you, Tang Sanzang said as he prayed for everyone. Thank you. We will definitely return successfully, Master Sanzang. Gadatsi was rather confident. We're ready. Assassin, you can begin, Gadatsi said to Wuming. Nodding, Wuming was not in a hurry to open the teleportation gate. Instead, he shouted into the void. Azrael. Yes, Master. The green-haired girl appeared out of thin air. Miss Azrael? Matthew was surprised. After all, Matthew and the others had not seen Azrael since their first meeting. Actually, Azrael has been hiding by Tachika's side under my orders to protect Tachika. After Azrael appeared, Wuming began his explanation, explaining why Gadatsi and the others had not seen Azrael except for their first meeting. I see. That person who was covering for us at the entrance of the mountain was also Azrael, right? Gadatsi widened her eyes, looking as if she had seen through everything. Indeed, it was me, meow, Azrael replied playfully with a hint of cuteness, but Gadatsi and the others, who had seen Azrael before, did not find it funny. Gadatsi and the others had seen Gazrael's aura, and Gadatsi vaguely remembered that when she first met Azrael, Azrael had addressed her as the commander of the Sky Wings. The aura of Azrael, who was not the commander, was already very powerful. Gadatsi did not even dare to imagine how terrifying Azrael, who was the commander of Gazrael, was. However, if Wuming knew what Gadatsi was thinking, he would definitely laugh out loud. Although Azrael was the commander, the strongest individual among the Sky Wings was still an outsider, Gazrael. However, at this moment, Hassan felt that something was wrong. Hassan looked angry, his hands clenched into fists, and he stared at Azrael. Although Hundred Faces Hassan was wearing a mask, the change in the atmosphere made it clear that Hundred Faces Hassan was glaring at Azrael. Cursed Wrist Hassan pressed down on Cursed Wrist Hassan, hinting at Hundred Looks Hassan not to be impulsive. This caused most of the people present to be dumbfounded. What was going on? Could it be that there was a grudge between them? This most of the people actually referred to the naive Gadatsi, Matthew, as well as Bedivere, Arash, Itatoda, Tang Sanzang, and a few others who had not come into contact with Azrael and Hassan. Gazrael looked like she was watching a good show. Her little face was flushed, and she was quite excited. This made Wuming glare at her. Whether it was Cursed Wrist Hassan, who was pressing Hassan's shoulder, Da Vinci, or even Roman in Chaldea's control room, they all basically understood what Hassan was angry about. Wuming sighed helplessly. Although this had nothing to do with him directly, it was indirectly related. The reason for Hassan's anger was smoky drunk Hassan's death. Azrael had always been with Gadatsi and the others, so as long as Azrael appeared, smoky drunk Hassan would not have to sacrifice himself. Of course, it was also wrong to resent others for not lending a helping hand as an excuse. Hassan was a smart person. He knew that if Azrael were to save him, no one else would be able to say anything about it. It was normal for Azrael not to help because this was her duty. There was no rule that stated that she had to help when she saw injustice. In addition, Azrael was Wuming's subordinate, so Hassan chose to remain silent. This disappointed Azrael, who had noticed from the beginning that someone was hostile to her. She had hoped that the monkey would attack her, and then she could fight back openly. The skywing species were not angels, but a species that sent others to meet angels. Therefore, it was a pity for Osriel that they couldn't fight. In the corner, quiet Hassan put his hands on his chest and heaved a sigh of relief. Although she didn't know what had happened between Hassan and Azrael, she didn't want to cause internal strife. On one side was her compatriot, and on the other side was the subordinate of someone who was not afraid of her poison. It could be said that Quiet Hassan was the last person who wanted to see Hassan and Azrael get into a conflict. "That's great, Sir Villo." Looking at Wu Ming's back, Quiet Hassan prayed silently. Wu Ming did not pay attention to Quiet Hassan. When he saw Hassan loosening his clenched fist, Wu Ming knew that this matter was not going to get out of hand. It was not that Wu Ming was gloating. It was quite unfavorable for them to have internal strife so close to the final battle. "In short, I will let Azrael go with you. Azrael, it's the end, so don't be stingy with your magic power. Just do it." 100 Faces Hassan did not pursue the matter, and Wu Ming would not mention it again. It was better to just turn the page. "Yes, master." Azrael bowed slightly and accepted Wu Ming's words. "Then, let's go." Seeing that the atmosphere had inexplicably returned to normal, Gadotsi did not try to find out what had happened, as long as everyone was fine. "Then, let's begin." Wu Ming finished and snapped his fingers. Pa! The portal instantly appeared in front of Gadotsi. The black-purple ripples were like a black hole, spinning as if to suck Gadotsi in. "Why do I feel a little scared?" Gadotsi smiled awkwardly at Wu Ming. "It's not the first time you've experienced my portal. What are you afraid of?" Wu Ming smiled helplessly. "Let's go, senpai, I will protect you." Matthew conveyed his faith to Gadotsi through his firm eyes, which made Gadotsi not afraid. "Oh. With Matthew around, it really makes people feel very at ease." Gadotsi hugged Matthew and rubbed against him. Matthew's face became rosy, but he did not refuse Gadotsi's closeness. What a beautiful sisterly relationship. Most of the people present thought so in their hearts. However, Wu Ming only felt that Tachibana's power was great. Then, Gadotsi and Matthew entered Wu Ming's black-purple portal side by side. He was followed by Cursed Wrist Hassan, 100 Faces Hassan, and Tranquil Hassan. The last ones were Arash and Kota Saito. "Then, master, I'll go first." "Meow," Azrael said and jumped into the portal. "Then, it's our turn next." Wu Ming looked at Bedivere and Jillian. Chapter 780. "You go first, Bedivere." Wu Ming snapped his fingers and opened another portal. "Then, Sir Villo, I'll wait for you first." Bedivere nodded to Wu Ming, waved his robe, and went into the portal that Wu Ming opened. "Then I'll be the second, master." Giliel smiled and flew into the second teleportation portal. Finally, Wu Ming looked at the last person besides himself, Xuanzang Sanzang. "Master Sanzang, take care of yourself here. You guys need to take care of yourselves. I just need to stay here, and you guys are going into the lion's den. It really makes this poor monk feel guilty." Tang Sanzang looked embarrassed. "No one is perfect, and the same is true for servants. I feel very lucky that Master Sanzang can pray for us," Wu Ming said. "Well then, Wizard Sanzang, take care." After Wu Ming finished speaking, he went into the portal as well. However, the portal that Wu Ming entered seemed to be, hey. You chose the wrong portal." However, the portal was still closed, leaving Tang Sanzang howling there alone. Forget it. Anyway, this portal's ability is his. He should come back if he notices that something is wrong. Tang Sanzang sighed. Walking to the window, Tang Sanzang looked at the blue sky, lowered his head, and prayed. Amitba, indeed, Wu Ming entered the first portal last, which meant that the portal that Wu Ming entered was the Sun King's side. However, that was not because Wu Ming chose the wrong portal, but because Wu Ming had deliberately chosen it because Wu Ming had already started a war with the other side in the Holy City. Skywing species surrounded the gate of the holy city, arranged in 3 rows in the sky, and the magic power in their hands was constantly surging. Wuming floated behind the 3 rows of skywing species, looking down with his hands crossed in front of his chest. Whoosh! The first row of skywing species launched a ball of magic power at the gate of the holy city like a cannonball, causing a big explosion. Boom! Immediately afterward, the skywing species in the first row immediately floated up and retreated to the back of the 3rd row. They began to reorganize themselves and became the new 3rd row. As for the 2nd row, they took a step forward and replaced the 1st row as they launched their attacks. Because they were charging up while the original 1st row was attacking, the damage dealt by the new 1st row was particularly obvious. Boom! As for the new 1st row, after releasing their attacks, they floated up to the current 3rd row, which was behind the original 1st row, and began to repair themselves. The original 3rd row had now become the 1st row. Because they had begun accumulating power when the 1st row released their attacks, they were now able to directly launch their attacks. The power of their attacks was still not bad compared to the 1st row. Boom! Immediately after, this row retreated to the last row and began to reorganize. The original 1st row became the 1st row once again, and because they began to accumulate power when the 1st row launched their attacks, they could also directly release their attacks now. In this way, the 3 rows of skywing species repeatedly attacked the holy city below without stopping. That's right. This was the simplest 3-section formation. Through the alternation of the 3 rows, they could instantly release attacks that couldn't be released instantly without stopping. Moreover, it was a highly concentrated attack. However, because the ordinary skywing species were berserker, it could be said that they couldn't even use such an ordinary formation. All of this was actually under the command of Wuming. With the contract as a link, Wuming had no problem giving some tasks to the skywing species as their master. Wuming was now rather helpless about the skywing species becoming berserkers. It was quite disadvantageous for a social creature to become berserkers because the advantage of social creatures was cooperation. One couldn't expect a group of berserkers to cooperate with each other. Fortunately, the skywing species still obeyed their master's orders as servants, so Wuming had no problem commanding the skywing species in battle. The 3-section formation kept firing, and with the skywing species in the air, the people of the holy city couldn't show their faces at all. This made things difficult for the gatekeeper, Gawain. Damn it! Is the enemy's magic infinite? Gawain, who was leading a group of solemn knights to hide behind the holy city's gates, was depressed. Although Gawain's combat strength had increased 3-fold under the sun, he wouldn't foolishly charge into the sea of cannons and take the damage. What if he died? What should he do? However, it turned out that the enemy's magic wasn't infinite. The magic cannons outside stopped. It couldn't be helped. If this continued, the 3 rows of skywing species would run out of magic power and leave. However, Wuming still had several thousand skywing species behind him, so he wasn't afraid of the enemy at all. However, Wuming could tell from the skywing species cannons that the holy city wouldn't be blown up so easily. Pure magic cannons wouldn't work at all. Thus, after the 3 rows of skywing species in front of Wuming stopped attacking, Wuming didn't continue sending the skywing species behind him to attack. With a snap of his fingers, a dark purple portal opened, and the 3 rows of skywing species in front of Wuming flew in an orderly fashion. The other side of the portal was inside Abin's body. Although the skywing species had descended as servants, and their magic power was exhausted or killed, it wouldn't affect their main body. Wuming still didn't want anything to happen to them. If he had the ability to protect his subordinates, why wouldn't he do it? Wuming had a wicked taste, but it was also divided into different aspects. The 3 rows of skywing species all entered the portal, and suddenly, a portal appeared beside Wuming. Bedivere walked out with an expression that said, "The wind is blowing and the water is freezing." Then, he began to fall. This gave Bedivere a fright. Why was the exit in the air? Wuming immediately used his mind power to pick up the falling Bedivere. Sir Villo. This is Bedivere was a little confused. Why was he, who had left first, slower than Wu Ming? And why was it in the air? However, before Wu Ming could answer, there was movement from the portal again. Oh. The second person to come out of the portal was Gopril. Is everyone here? Has it already started? Looking at the many sisters behind her, Gopril was a little confused. But because she could fly, Gopril didn't fall from the sky like Bedivere. Master. Aren't you behind me? Gopril had the same question. Seeing that there was no movement from the holy city, Wu Ming looked at Bedivere and Gopril. Don't worry, one question at a time. Then, Gopril beat him to it. Me first, me first. Question, why are there two masters? Chapter 781. Because the one talking to you in West Village just now was my clone, Wu Ming answered truthfully. Clone? Both Jillian and Bedivere were taken aback, and then they were shocked. As expected of Lord Villo. I didn't realize that it was a clone at all. That clone gave me the feeling that it was Lord Villo's main body. Bedivere had a "you're amazing" expression. It not only highlighted Wu Ming's strength, but it also didn't look exaggerated. It was just right. It was nothing to have an outstanding expression. Wu Ming had seen many people like this, but those guys were all acting. As for Bedivere, Wu Ming knew very well that this guy's expression was his true expression. This made Wu Ming feel rather uncomfortable. That's one of the gods' authority I obtained in the other world. A perfect clone. Except for the extremely special ability that can't be replicated, the clone is exactly the same as the main body. This authority was naturally Wu Ming's 12 clones dependent incarnation. However, the dependent incarnation had already been used by Wu Ming when he summoned the Skywing species, so why could he continue to use it? This was thanks to the Dragon Seed incarnation. The Dragon Seed incarnation mainly gave Wu Ming the ability to dragonize, but Wu Ming was a dragon himself, so this ability was slightly useless. However, there were no useless abilities, only poor users. Wu Ming had long discovered that the Dragon Seed incarnation could give the user an extremely strong physique. Whether it was physical fitness or magic power, they were all unprecedentedly improved. It was especially effective when combined with Giant Incarnation, Phoenix Incarnation, and other avatars. Therefore, Wu Ming wondered if the Dragon Seed incarnation could be used to strengthen other avatars. After Wu Ming experimented, he found that this idea could be done. Because of Tristan's appearance in West Village, Wu Ming already had doubts about Ramses II. After sending Tristan off, Wu Ming was not in a hurry to go back. Instead, he studied how to strengthen the Dragon Seed incarnation to other incarnations to see what effect it would have. Wu Ming decided to strengthen the Dragon Seed incarnation on his dependent incarnation, which allowed Wu Ming's dependent incarnation to revive. Because it was a degraded version of the avatar ability, each avatar could not use it again after using it once. This was the reason why the dependent avatars could not use it again. However, the unexpected surprise of the Dragon Seed incarnation had resurrected the dependent incarnation. Although the Dragon Seed incarnation could not be used, it was not a big deal. Although it was cruel to say that, the Dragon Seed was not very useful to Wu Ming. After that, Wu Ming's doppelganger returned to West Village and discussed with Gadotsi and the others. As for Wu Ming himself, he directly went to Holy City and launched an attack on it. In any case, no matter how the doppelganger was grouped with Gadotsi, Wu Ming would definitely be among the people who came to Holy City. Therefore, Wu Ming came ahead of time. Moreover, Wu Ming and the doppelganger were still connected. Although they could not share images, they could at least exchange information. In addition, the doppelganger and the main body were the same person. Wu Ming was not worried that the doppelganger would mess things up. I see. That's why I felt that the doppelganger master was a little illusory. Gopril completely understood what was going on. Instead, it was Silent Wonder who looked at Gopril in surprise. Even his own mother would not be able to tell, yet Gopril, a mere skywing species, was actually able to see the clues? Could it be that the vitality incarnation ability in Gopril's body made Gopril and Wuming's dependent incarnation have a little mutual encouragement? Wuming felt that this should be the case. Sir Villo, have you already started a war with Holy City? Although Bedivere didn't see the 3 rows of sky wings, the careful Bedivere saw that the main gate of the Holy City, the surrounding walls, and the ground were all slightly damaged. Even the radiance of the Holy City had dimmed a little. I have the advantage in numbers. Why would I fight Gawain alone? Wuming pointed at the thousands of sky wings behind him and smiled. Although there were not tens of thousands of them, they still numbered in the thousands. Bedivere was a little helpless. He did not expect Sir Villo to still have such a personality. All right, it's just a joke. Wuming shook his head. I was actually testing the strength of Holy City, and it was just as I expected. Holy City is exactly the same as Camello City. Its walls are also as thick as Camello City. Wuming spread his hands. Wuming thought of Matthew's noble phantasm, which was as indestructible as the walls of Holy City in front of him. In this case, there's really no other good way except to start from the gates. As a knight of the Round Table, Bedivere naturally understood the power of his own city walls. Wuming also tried an air raid, but it did not succeed. Just like what he saw a few days ago, a layer of light covered the sky above Holy City. It was the light film emitted by the Holy Spear, which seemed to be specially designed to defend against aerial units. The sky wings could not enter at all. In that case, this gate of Good City will be broken by my noble phantasm. As Wuming spoke, he took out the meteor silver from the golden ripples in the void. Meteor silver splendor, X silver meteor, level, EX type, evil noble phantasm distance. Maximum catch? This was a treasure created by the planet's suppression. The Holy Star Sword, which had truly been released from its restrictions, had the effect of determining the target as evil. As long as it had the definition of the user's enemy or someone who must be defeated, it would be marked with the evil attribute by the Holy Sword. The target of the determination was both a person and an object. Even concepts such as space and time could be included in the determination. Ever since the meteor silver had been consecrated by the suppression, cough cough. After the transformation, it had gained this powerful noble phantasm. It was with this noble phantasm that the fledgling Wuming successfully defeated the other party in the battle with the Indian demigod Karna. However, it was only a narrow victory. Karna was mainly completely shrouded in the aftermath that could not spread out. To put it simply, he was affected by the aftermath. Karna, who had unleashed his most powerful attack, had lost his invincible armor, and had been affected by the aftershock of the collision between his most powerful attack and Silent's most powerful attack. How could he not be forced out of the arena? And Wuming still had armor and recovery potions at that time, so naturally, he could survive more than Karna. Back to the main point, the main effect of Wuming's noble phantasm was to determine the target of the attack as evil, and then he would launch the attack. At that time, Wuming, who was fighting Karna, had used this noble phantasm more like a light cannon than an evil judgment. That was why he had won by a narrow margin. However, Wuming was no longer immature now. He could fully unleash the true power of this sword. Chapter 782. At this moment, Wuming suddenly received news that his clone and Gadotzi had gone to an incredible place. Is it because of the Great Shrine's barrier that caused the teleportation to deviate? Wuming muttered to himself in an extremely soft voice. This was Wuming's oversight. When Wuming had gone to find Ramses II, Ramses II's Great Shrine had blocked Wuming's teleportation gate. Although it was indoors, it was very likely that Ramses II had spread the barrier to the entire Great Shrine complex, or even the surroundings of the complex. Wuming was not surprised. After all, the other party was a top-tier servant. Thus, the teleportation deviation could be said to have been caused by Wuming's negligence. However, with my clone around, there shouldn't be any problems. Although after entering the Atlas courtyard, the connection between the original body and the avatar had weakened a lot, even so, Wu Ming didn't think that anything would happen to Gadotzi and the others. When his clone had held Gadotzi's hand to pray to Gadotzi, he had attached a command seal to the back of Gadotzi's hand. That command seal could be considered the key to opening Wu Ming's prized artifact. The clone finally entered the teleportation gate that Gadotzi and the others had used. The moment he entered, the clone changed the destination of the teleportation gate to his prized artifact, Dragonist. When an accident happened, the clone could use that switch to save the situation. Besides, Gadotzi had so many servants. While he did not dare to say that she would be able to take care of everything on her own, it would be a groundless worry if something happened. Thus, Wu Ming only needed to take care of the matter at hand. Then, I'll begin. After Wu Ming said that, the Sky Wings seemed to have received some sort of order and collectively retreated. Only Gopril and Bedivere, who was being controlled by Wu Ming's mental power, remained by Wu Ming's side. Closing his eyes, Wu Ming held the hilt of meteor silver with both hands and held it upright in front of his chest as he began to activate his prized artifact. The stars hidden in the world, Wu Ming's ethereal voice came out of his mouth. Next, Meteor Silver's blade began to emit a silver-white light that illuminated everything around it. Holy sword to annihilate all evil, cracks appeared on the silver-white blade of the silver meteor sword, and an even purer golden light burst out from the cracks. Don't cover your light. When Wu Ming finished chanting this sentence, the entire blade of meteor silver instantly shattered with a crack. The golden sword of light that did not have a physical body was born from the destruction. Like a sprout that was about to grow into a towering tree, it constantly floated and grew. The completely shattered blade of meteor silver turned into silver fragments that adhered to the golden sword of light and extended along with it. Inside the holy city's gates, Gawain gulped and immediately ordered the Knights of Solemnity to retreat. He knew that this was not something that they, or even the holy city's gates, could stop. Shine. Finally, like the straw that broke the camel's back, the golden sword of light burst forth once more, a scorching and dazzling radiance illuminating the earth. Gopril and Bedivere, who were next to Wu Ming, could not help but use their hands to cover their eyes. The radiance of meteor silver was simply too dazzling. Silver meteor, meteor silver splendor. With the final prized artifact, true name Liberation, Wu Ming swung it down. Whoosh! Like a surging river, the golden light swept toward the holy city's gates like a flood and slammed into them. Boom! The Sky Wings all closed their eyes and used their wings to cover themselves. Bedivere and Gopril could not help but retreat because of the pressure generated by this attack. Sir Villo. Bedivere forced his eyes open and looked at Wu Ming in front of him. Bedivere had never known how powerful Wu Ming was. This power can definitely save my king. Bedivere prayed, but in the end, because the radiance was too dazzling, Bedivere still closed his eyes. The radiance lasted for a few moments before quickly disappearing. The holy city's gates had already been opened. There was no sign of damage. It was as if the holy city's gates had never been there in the first place. They had completely disappeared. The gates that were defined as evil had been completely removed by the holy sword of justice. Wu Ming landed on the ground, and Bedivere and Gopril followed him down. After landing on the ground, Bedivere looked through the gates and saw the holy city's interior. The trees were neatly trimmed, and it did not reduce its beauty. The ground was all stone, without any trace of dust. Moreover, the roads were very neatly planned, and even the buildings were bright white, as if they were made of marble. Bedivere could even vaguely see a fountain through the gates. Everything was so beautiful that it was practically an ideal city. Although it was very much like Camelot, it was even more beautiful than Camelot. Bedivere had already begun to understand why people who were not pure could not enter. Letting evil people step into such a beautiful city was simply a stain on it. Of course, it might be better if one ignored the large number of solemn knights and Gawain who had begun to urgently assemble. Are you ready, Bedivere? Wu Ming asked Bedivere without turning his head as he looked at the solemn knights walking out of the gates. There was no doubt that Wu Ming was asking Bedivere if he was ready to rush into the holy city and face the Lion King. Yes. Always ready, Sir Villo. Bedivere's eyes became firm as he answered Wooming with a firm tone. Then, let's begin, everyone. At Wooming's command, the skywing species curled into a ball and the sky instantly spread their wings and swooped down collectively, beginning the battle with the solemn knights. On the other side, at Godatzi's place, time jumped forward. A black-purple ripple appeared somewhere in the desert, and then a girl with orange hair and a girl with a shield appeared from it. These two were naturally Godatzi and Matthew. Desert? Godatzi was stunned. Although the Sun King was indeed in the desert, it was impossible for there to be any buildings around. Sir Villo said that he would teleport us to the vicinity of the Sun King's great temple, but I can't see any temples around. Matthew was also quite helpless. Could it be that we came to the wrong place? Before Godatzi and Matthew could discuss what was going on, there was movement in the portal again. The big sister with the face of Mona Lisa appeared. Did we come to the wrong place? Da Vinci noticed the surroundings as soon as he arrived. Doctor, are you there? Godatzi asked her bracelet. However, no one responded to Godatzi. It seems that the desert barrier should have cut off Chaldea's communication again, Matthew said. Although they were prepared for not being able to contact Chaldea, Godatzi and the others still hoped to be able to contact him. What should we do now? Chapter 783. The portal should be two-way. Senior, let's hurry back through the portal, Matthew suggested. However, the sound of Hassan and Arash landing on the ground gave Matthew a negative answer. After everyone arrived, the teleportation portal closed instantly. This made Matthew, who proposed the idea of returning now, quite embarrassed, and it also made Hassan and Arash quite embarrassed. They all heard what Matthew said, but since things had come to this point, they could only bite the bullet. Hassan, who jumped out of the portal, landed on one knee. Maintaining the posture of kneeling on one knee, Cursed Wrist Hassan, like Godatzi and Matthew, was full of doubts about the scene in front of him. Did we come to the wrong place? Although he did hear Matthew's words, Cursed Wrist Hassan did not know why Matthew wanted to go back through the portal. But now, Cursed Wrist Hassan almost understood. We should have come to the wrong place. 100 Faces Hassan stood up, took 2 steps, and looked around. Quiet Hassan nodded slightly as if he knew her name. As the only archer, Arash made full use of the function of her telescope. The surrounding is a flat desert, there are no sand dunes, and there are no traces of any buildings, Arash said. What do we do now? Arash looked at Godatzi. Without Wooming, Godatzi, as the master, was their leader. Anyway, the portal has been closed. Let's explore the surroundings and see which direction is the Sun King's territory. Immediately afterward, Godatzi looked at Da Vinci. Only Da Vinci was a caster, and this time, they had to rely on caster. It's useless to look at me. I have no problem figuring out the direction in the desert, but if you want to ask me, where are we now, it's really difficult. Sure enough, even the genius Da Vinci can't do anything about this. Matthew was a little disappointed. Mr. Hassan, can you tell where we are? Godatzi looked at Cursed Wrist Hassan, as well as his companions, 100 Faces Hassan and Tranquil Hassan. Although our Hassan is not afraid of the sandstorm in the desert, if we didn't come here ourselves, we wouldn't know where we are in the desert now. Cursed Wrist Hassan shook his head and gave Godatzi a disappointed answer. Then what should we do? Godatzi had a "we're done for" look on her face. I've discovered something interesting. Da Vinci suddenly spoke. Although Da Vinci was unable to complete Godatzi's request, Da Vinci was still capable of simply exploring the surroundings. What did you discover, Da Vinci's lover? Godatzi quickly walked up to Da Vinci. There's a barrier in front of us. But, Da Vinci's lover, our main task now is to crusade against the Sun King. How can finding a barrier help us at this time? Matthew was puzzled. Although that's true, Matthew, if there's a building with a barrier in the desert, if it doesn't belong to the Sun King, then there must be a big secret. After all, the Sun King had moved all the buildings together to form his temple complex. Now that we have no clue, there's no harm in taking a look. Maybe we can find out where we are now. With that, Da Vinci took the lead and walked over. Hey, wait for us, Da Vinci's lover. Gadazzi pulled Matthew and quickly caught up. Meanwhile, the three Hassans and Arash looked at each other. What should we do? Cursed Wrist Hassan asked quietly. Follow me. 100 Faces Hassan finished speaking, and with a handsome swing, he followed Gadazzi. Quiet Wrist Hassan followed closely behind 100 Faces Hassan. Indeed, as Ms. Da Vinci said, we can only take one step at a time. Arash smiled and said something to Cursed Wrist Hassan, then quickly followed. I didn't say I wouldn't follow, I just wanted to ask. Scratching his head, Cursed Wrist Hassan, who was left alone, also followed. Wu Ming's clone in the Dragon Lair space saw the situation outside through the special command seal on the back of Gadazzi's hand. The clone was also very sorry about the unexpected teleportation deviation. However, he was quite interested in the barrier and buried building that Da Vinci mentioned. If it's not Ramses II's building, what could it be? The clone pondered. Everything is normal on the main body side, and I don't have to rush to attack Ramses II. Let's see what Tachika and the others can find. There was something the clone did not say. He had a hunch that the Sun King was the final enemy. On the Holy City side, the Sky Wings and the Solemn Knights were fighting. As soon as they came, the Sky Wings condensed energy weapons and began a melee battle with the Solemn Knights. It could not be helped. Although using magic for long-range bombardment was also very good, the Sky Wings still liked to fight in melee. Even if the Sky Wings had lost their minds, they could still beat the Solemn Knights into retreat. It should not be forgotten that the Sky Wings appeared in the world as servants. Even Berserker was a servant, and it was not an existence that the Solemn Knights could fight against. The Solemn Knights generally relied on numbers to swarm the servants, but this time, their trick was not effective. Although they couldn't count, maybe the number of enemy servants was more than the number of Solemn Knights. However, because the Sky Wings were all melee fighters, the Solemn Knights could rely on numbers to replace the other party. However, in the current situation, 10 Solemn Knights for one Sky Wing was quite extravagant and basically impossible. Basically, it would take 100 Solemn Knights to replace one Sky Wing. It was a good thing that the Sky Wings were servants, or else Wu Ming would not have let them fight like this. Let alone 100 Solemn Knights, even if there were thousands or tens of thousands of them to replace one Sky Wing, Wu Ming would still feel the pinch. Putting aside the fact that the Sky Wings were his subordinates, they were still young girls. How could they compare to these smelly old men? Putting aside the joke, even if it was 100 Solemn Knights for one Sky Wing, the defeat of the Solemn Knights was clearly visible. If not for the fact that there was no order from above, Gawain might have already ordered the Solemn Knights to retreat. That was because if this continued, the Solemn Knights of the Holy City would all be dead. However, even if they were all dead, they could not retreat. When Wu Ming had used the noble artifact to blow up the gate, he had ordered the Solemn Knights to retreat to avoid unnecessary casualties. Now, however, they had to defend the main gate. For the king. With that thought in mind, Gawain swung his sword and killed a Sky Wing that was attacking him. The Sky Wing turned into magic power and disappeared from Gawain's side. Hold on. The Holy City must be defended. Chapter 784. Wu Ming and Bedivere stood at the back of the fighting army and watched. Giliel could no longer bear the excitement and had run to the battlefield to fight. The reason Wu Ming did not go up to fight was very simple. His ultimate goal was never to fight, but to charge into the Holy City. There was simply no point in fighting. Fighting was a reward for the Sky Wing breeds, so Wu Ming gave this reward to the Sky Wing breeds who enjoyed fighting. Wu Ming glanced at the eager Bedivere and said, "What? What's wrong, Bedivere? Do you want to fight too?" "No, Sir Villo. I just feel that we shouldn't be idling here." Bedivere silently shook his head. Bedivere was a knight of noble character, after all. Seeing his own people charge into the fray while he enjoyed the safety in the rear was something he could not bear. You don't need to think too much, Bedivere. The Skywing breeds are god-killing weapons. Fighting is what they like to do. Wuming then pointed at the Skywing breeds closest to Bedivere and said, "Look." Bedivere looked over and saw that the Skywing breeds in the midst of fighting was smiling. Not only that, but the Skywing breeds around her were also smiling. It was clearly a berserker, but they were smiling. It was impossible to say that they were not happy, and this was a joy that came from their very bones. That's why having the Skywings fight is actually a reward for them. Besides, as Wuming said this, he narrowed his eyes and looked at Gawain, who was constantly killing the Skywing breeds. We still have an even more important mission. The Skywing breeds were truly very powerful, and the Solemn Knights could only kill 1 out of 100 of them, but that was only for the Solemn Knights. To Gawain, who had the Knightless blessing, the Skywing breeds that enjoyed fighting were not frightening. No matter how powerful a beast was, it was still a beast. Hunters always had a way to deal with beasts. Just like now. The Skywing breeds attacking Gawain swung their scythes at him, but Gawain dodged to the side. Due to inertia, the Skywing's scythe landed heavily on the ground. But because of this momentary inertia, Gawain's solar holy sword cut off the Skywing's head. The headless Skywing seed shook twice, turned into pure magic power, and disappeared. The lack of rationality was the greatest weakness of the Skywing species, while having rationality was Gawain's greatest advantage. Gawain was already annoyed by the constant bombardment from the Skywing lifeforms. Now that the Skywing lifeforms had stopped their bombardment and switched to close combat, Gawain was naturally happy to oblige. Although the Solemn Knight was retreating, it was still better than not daring to go out and fight with the enemy. Previously, he would have died in vain if he went out. Now, at least he could take a few enemies with him. Of course, even if they wanted to defend, there was no way to do so. The holy city's gate was gone, and there was no way to defend. After Gawain killed quite a few Skywing species, the surrounding Skywing species realized the threat he posed. The Skywing species had indeed gone berserk due to their berserker class, but their instincts were still there. Just as the instincts of wild beasts told them that beast hunters were dangerous, the instincts of the Skywing species told them that this golden-haired monkey wielding a white longsword and wearing white armor was very dangerous. Several Skywing species swarmed forward, attempting to tear apart this threatening monkey from all directions. However, it was clear that this golden-haired monkey was not afraid of attacks coming from all directions. In fact, it was perfect for dealing with enemies coming from all directions. Excalibur Gallatin. Gawain instantly released the solar holy sword, which turned into a scorching sun and sent the Skywing species that got close to Gawain flying. Because they were deep in the battlefield and the Solemn Knight was still around, Gawain's Noble Phantasm did not do much, only using the lowest level of Noble Phantasm release. Thus, the Skywing species that were attacking Gawain were sent flying instead of being vaporized by the heat. However, even the lowest level of Noble Phantasm release was still quite scorching for the Skywing species that were close to Gawain. These Skywing species that were sent flying turned into magic particles in the next second and left the battlefield. Gawain waved his solar holy sword and was quite satisfied. At this rate, the main gate won't fail. However, reality told Gawain that he could not casually raise flags. Silver. The half-released Noble Phantasm instantly slashed at Gawain. As expected of Gawain, he immediately placed the solar holy sword in front of him. Clang! The dazzling white meteor silver clashed with Gawain's solar holy sword, producing an ear-piercing sound of metal clashing. Because meteor silver was in a half-released state, Gawain could not help but half-kneel after receiving the attack. Bang! This was the sound of Gawain's knee hitting the ground. Gawain stood up and spread out meteor silver, panting as he looked ahead. Sir Villo, since when have you become a sneak attacker? I don't want to hear you say that, Gawain. Wuming waved his sword and removed the meteor silver's Noble Phantasm from its half-released state. This is a battlefield. Do you think I'll yell, "I'm going to attack you" before attacking you? Don't make me laugh. However, Wu Ming still laughed, but it was a mocking laugh. Gawain naturally understood what Wu Ming meant. Or rather, how could he not understand? There was no such thing as a sneak attack on a battlefield where danger lurked everywhere. From the moment you stepped into the battlefield, it meant that you agreed to be attacked at any time and place. That's my fault. However, Gawain did not have the slightest fault. Instead, he assumed an attacking stance. It couldn't be helped. The Holy City had already given the order that Wu Ming was an enemy. As a knight who completely obeyed the king, Wu Ming was Gawain's enemy. "You go in first," Wu Ming suddenly said. Of course, this was not said to Gawain, but to Bedivere, who was walking behind Wu Ming. "Sir Bedivere." Gawain was stunned, but he soon understood. Back then, Chaldea's master claimed to be the messenger of this new force, and Bedivere had escaped with Chaldea's people. Therefore, Bedivere was naturally one of them. It was not strange that he would appear at this juncture. "The holy city's gate is open. You go in first, I'll be right behind you," Wu Ming repeated. "Yes, Sir Villo." Bedivere obeyed Wu Ming's words and immediately ran towards the holy city's gate from the other side. "Wait." Gawain would not let Bedivere enter even if it was him. However, Wu Ming directly rushed forward and swung Meteor Silver down heavily again. Bang! Another clash of swords. "Give up, Gawain. With me here, you won't be able to stop Bedivere." Pressing down on Gawain with his sword, Wu Ming said while looking into Gawain's eyes at such a close distance. Gawain's frown deepened. Chapter 785. As a comrade who had served King Arthur for many years, Gawain understood Wu Ming very well, just as Wu Ming understood Gawain very well. Similarly, Gawain also understood how terrifying Wu Ming was. He had a mysterious background, an ageless face, and mysterious runic magic. Even in the Knights of the Round Table, Wu Ming's martial prowess was one of the best. Unlike Gawain's wide-open swordsmanship, Wu Ming's swordsmanship was both wide-open and agile. This was all thanks to the teachings of Wu Ming's master and sister, Skaha. Wu Ming and Gawain exchanged blows. Sometimes, their sacred swords would clash, creating sparks. Sometimes, they would dodge, creating dangerous situations. Sometimes, they would attack and defend quickly, their swords dancing in the air. In the end, they would occasionally kill a few Knights of Solemnity and Sky Wings. Of course, it was Wu Ming who killed the Knights of Solemnity and Gawain who killed the Sky Wings. Although it was only a few exchanges, if an expert was present, they would realize that Wu Ming and Gawain had engaged in an extremely thrilling exchange of blows. However, because Wu Ming was not pursuing the pinnacle of martial arts, Wu Ming's martial prowess had not yet reached the level of being invincible. Furthermore, Gawain's saint's number had tripled his strength, so Wu Ming had not immediately taken him down. However, Gawain could not do anything to Wu Ming. As expected, "You haven't changed, Gawain." Wu Ming and Gawain stood a few meters apart, staring at each other. Wu Ming and Gawain had exchanged a few blows, undoubtedly to test Gawain's ability. Gawain was exactly as Wu Ming had expected him to be. "After all, I'm already dead. How can I grow?" Gawain would not ignore Wu Ming just because he was an enemy. "But even so, Sir Villo, you can't take me down immediately." With the protection of Knightless, Gawain was even confident that he wouldn't lose to Wu Ming. In this way, Bedivere, who had barged into the holy city but didn't receive any reinforcements, was no longer a concern. After all, Agwawan was still in the holy city. "So, while you stopped growing, I didn't stop growing at all." It was also because of this that Wu Ming didn't do much research on martial arts. Unlike Luo Hao in the God Slayer world, who had studied martial arts to the extreme and reached the pinnacle of martial arts, Wu Ming was neither interested nor necessary. After all, Wu Ming only needed the means to defeat the enemy. Wu Ming stabbed the meteor silver into the ground and held the sword hilt with one hand. He then closed his eyes and placed his other hand on his heart as he began to chant. I am the strongest, and I hold victory in my hands. No matter if it's a human or a demon, he's someone who will defeat all his enemies. Not good. Before Wooming finished chanting, Gawain sensed danger. He absolutely could not allow the other party to finish reading this inexplicable sentence. That was what Gawain thought. Gawain stomped on the ground and rushed toward Wooming with the solar holy sword that was beginning to heat up. However, Gawain's speed was not as fast as Wooming's mouth. I will defeat any enemy that stands in my way. The moment he finished chanting, Wooming opened his eyes. His originally red eyes had now turned golden, and a golden mist began to appear around Wooming's body. Excalibur Gallatin. Gawain instantly released his noble phantasm and attempted to use it to attack Wooming. However, a large golden hand grabbed Gawain's body instantly. The golden mist around Wooming began to spread and solidify, forming a golden giant with only the upper half of his body. The hand that grabbed Gawain was none other than the giant's hand. Gawain's noble phantasm exploded in the giant's palm, and the flames of the sun seeped out from the gaps between the giant's fists like fireworks. Immediately after, the giant seemed to stand up, its two legs stepping out of the ground and firmly landing on the ground. Boom! Boom! The giant landed with two loud thuds, causing the sky wings and the Knights of Solemnity to stop in their tracks. How could there be an enemy like that? It was a good thing that the sky wings had gone berserk and could not speak, or else they would have been very excited. Everyone stopped what they were doing. This was not an act but a subconscious reaction. Everyone could sense the extreme danger of the golden giant, and they all stopped what they were doing. They all watched helplessly as the golden giant grabbed the sun that was still spewing flames. Then, the giant raised Gawain up high and slammed him down on the ground. The moment he hit the ground, the giant opened its palm and pressed Gawain firmly into the ground. Boom! Whoosh! A deafening sound created a visible shockwave that swept through the entire battlefield with the golden giant at its center. Wah! The Knights of Solemnity and the Sky Wings were all sent flying. Wooming was at the golden giant's heart, looking down at Gawain, who was pressed down by the giant's palm, without the slightest bit of surprise. This was why he did not pursue martial arts to the extreme. He had a way to defeat his enemy. What is this? Gawain clenched his teeth and asked Wooming in a rather sorry state. Killed the authority of a god. Personally, I think it's not bad, Wooming casually described. Gawain could only bitterly smile. It was indeed not bad. Gawain was unable to resist at all. Gawain's flames could indeed cause damage to the golden giant, but they were not very effective. Furthermore, the golden giant was formed from dense air, and it would immediately replenish itself after being burned. Thus, Gawain had no way of dealing with the giant. Furthermore, the giant's main ability was immense strength, so Gawain was completely unable to get up while being pressed down by the golden giant. Even the solar holy sword had fallen out of his hand and was pressed to the side. I've lost, Lord Villo, Gawain said indifferently as if he had given up. It's good that you understand. After all, he did not have to kill him. If possible, Wooming wished to spare Gawain's life. However, I swore an oath to my king that I would defend the city gate until the very end. However, Wooming really wanted to retort, your city gate was destroyed by me a long time ago. Hold on, are you thinking of? Wooming suddenly realized a problem. Gawain's words sounded like he was speaking from the bottom of his heart before he died, as if he wanted to drag his enemy down with him. That's right, Lord Villo. I'm going to self-destruct. Gawain bared his white teeth, looking very proud. Then, the solar holy sword and Gawain's body began to emit a blazing light. Boom! Chapter 786. On Gadotzi's side, everyone followed Da Vinci to, or accidentally fell into a mysterious clubhouse. This clubhouse, in Da Vinci's view, was simply magic workshop. Da Vinci looked at the entrance in front of him and made such a judgment. What? Da Vinci, is this the magic workshop? However, for such a large-scale workshop, there should be records of it in history. Da Vinci fell silent. Because she couldn't find the information of this magic workshop from her memory. This is Atlas Courtyard. Suddenly, a man's voice came from the shadows. Who is it? Cursed Wrist Hassan, Hundred Faces Hassan, and Tranquil Hassan immediately took out their daggers, full of vigilance. Until the other party made a sound, Hassan didn't find a person in the shadows, which undoubtedly made Hassan lose face, but at the same time, the other party also made Hassan feel danger. Hassan alone couldn't discover this unknown servant was dangerous enough. Senpai. Matthew also immediately summoned a shield and stood in front of Gadotsi. The man who made a sound in the shadows gave everyone the feeling that he was a servant after he leaked his aura. Confirmed that the other party is a servant, master, please be careful. Matthew reported to Gadotsi. Arash, on the other hand, was not vigilant because of this, or Arash felt that the other party was not a bad person. Da Vinci, Gadotsi just wanted to discuss with Da Vinci, but Da Vinci suddenly shouted as if he was possessed. Atlas Courtyard. Da Vinci took 2 steps forward and looked at the shadows. Is this really Atlas Courtyard? What's wrong with Da Vinci? Where is Atlas Courtyard? Gadotsi knew nothing about it, so she looked at Matthew, who had some understanding of the magic world. Senior, I don't know the details. I only know the name Atlas Academy. It's said to be one of the 3 major departments of the Magic Association, but it doesn't have any contact with outsiders. Matthew returned to Gadotsi based on his own understanding. Although it's one of the departments of the Magic Association, it's the same as the Imitation Scarlet Sea. It's a secret society that doesn't communicate with outsiders, Da Vinci explained. He's also an expert in alchemy. It's said that the 7 alchemy tools sealed in Atlas Academy can destroy the world 7 times, the man in the shadow explained. Destroy the world 7 times? This gave Gadotsi a fright. Ignoring Gadotsi's shock for the time being, Da Vinci revealed another secret. It's said that the headquarters of the Academy of Atlas is located in Egypt's Atlas Mountains. It seems that it's true. After all, this is the territory of Ramses II, which is Egypt, so it's not surprising that Atlas Academy exists here, the man in the shadow said and walked out of the shadow. He was wearing a suit like an English gentleman, holding a decorative cane in one hand, and a rather old pipe in the other hand, and a detective's face. Nice to meet you, everyone from Chaldea, Hassan, and the great hero of West Asia, Mr. Arash. The man with the pipe said everyone's identity as soon as he opened his mouth. This caused everyone to suck in a breath of cold air. Although the other party didn't completely say the name of Gadotsi, since he could say the name of Chaldea, then he should know the name. The other party should say it for brevity. I'm sorry for forgetting to introduce myself. The man with the pipe showed a rather sorry smile and then began to introduce himself. I am Sherlock Holmes, a caster servant. Nice to meet you, the last master of Chaldea, Rika Fujimaru. This time, the other party said the name of Gadotsi, but that was not the point. The point was the other party's real name, which shocked Gadotsi and the others. Sherlock Holmes? At the gate of the Holy City. The big explosion caused by Gawain's self-explosion swept almost half of the battlefield. It could only be said that he deserved to be called the Sun Knight. His self-explosion was like a burning sun. It completely turned into a red fireball burning on the flat ground in front of the Holy City. However, this sun explosion only lasted for a short while, and soon the fireball disappeared, and the explosion stopped. However, the entire battlefield was destroyed. Because the Holy City was protected by the city walls, other than the street without the city gate that had turned black and melted, the walls of the Holy City were just like bricks that had been severely burned by the flames. There was basically no major problem. On the flat ground in front of the Holy City, there were no jagged holes, only a huge semicircular pit, which was mainly caused by the fireball. The huge pit was filled with magma, and the high temperature had caused the ground to melt. Whether it was soil, rocks, minerals, or anything else, they had all melted together to form this magma. It was also because of the explosion of the sun that the Knights of Solemnity were basically all dead, and only a few Knights of Solemnity who were far away from the explosion were still alive. In other words, their bodies were still there, but they had already lost their vitality inside their armor. The moisture in their bodies had been completely dried up, which was the fate of the Knights of Solemnity at the very edge. Compared to the Knights of Solemnity, the Sky Wings were both better and worse. Most of the Sky Wings, like most of the Knights of Solemnity, were instantly melted by the explosion of the sun and left the battlefield. However, because they were servants, the Sky Wings at the very edge were not as dried up as the Knights of Solemnity. Instead, they stubbornly survived. However, they were basically injured to the point where they couldn't continue fighting. Wu Ming had been at the very center of the explosion and had indeed disappeared. In the center of the huge pit, in the slowly condensing magma, a golden hand suddenly extended out of the magma. Immediately after, a golden giant crawled out of the magma as if it had crawled out of a quagmire, but only half of its body was visible. Then, the golden giant's head evaporated like gas, and a figure flew out. This figure was none other than Wu Ming. Why do all of them like to self-destruct? Wu Ming was particularly perplexed by this point. To be honest, Wu Ming had encountered many enemies who liked to self-destruct, such as Shutendaji of the Winterwood Peculiarity, Ibaraki Boy of the American Peculiarity, and Mordred at the entrance of Higashi Village. But to be honest, self-destructing isn't a bad method. Wu Ming chuckled. This was none other than Lord Hyunryong, who had used a different kind of self-destruct on Gorgon back at the Mesopotamia Singularity. However, thanks to Gawain, another one of my clones has lost its effectiveness. Chapter 787. Wu Ming turned to look at the headless golden giant in the lava. After the golden giant spat out Wu Ming, its body began to turn into golden particles and gradually dissipate. Wu Ming, who was completely protected by the giant, was unscathed, but his avatar had been rendered useless. However, it was not as if there was no good news. The solemn Knights of the Holy City had basically been wiped out, and while the Sky Wings had also suffered heavy casualties, they had only lost their avatars. Their main bodies were completely unharmed. Meanwhile, Wu Ming had used an avatar to exchange for Gawain, the gatekeeping general. Thus, overall, it was not a loss, and from the overall situation, the Holy City did not have many servants left. Meanwhile, on Wu Ming's side, putting aside the fact that the Skywing army had suffered heavy casualties from Gawain's self-destruction, Gopral had yet to leave. With that thought in mind, Wu Ming began to search for Gopral's figure. Cough, cough, cough. Cough, cough. What was that fireball? It came out of nowhere. Gopral's calves and feet were connected to her thighs as she sat on the ground in a rather sorry state, shaking her head that had been blasted by the explosion. Don't look at how Gopral's body was covered in dust and looked like she had been roasted into charcoal. However, Gopral was completely fine. No, to be more precise, she had completely recovered from her injuries. With the support of the Vitality Avatar, no matter how severe her injuries were, as long as Gopral had not been completely reduced to ashes, she would be able to fully recover in no time. When Gawain self-destructed, while Gopral was not in the center, she was still within the range of the explosion, so she had suffered quite a bit of burn damage. However, in that moment of chaos, Gopral's injuries had completely healed by relying on the power of the Vitality Avatar. After coming back to her senses, Gopral looked at her body and saw that she had no other injuries aside from a little black. She immediately began to laugh. Speaking of which, Master's power is really useful. Hee hee. Bang. However, Wu Ming gave her another blow to the head. Ouch! Giliel cried out in pain as she clutched her head with tears in her eyes. What are you laughing at? Clean yourself up and get ready to enter the Holy City with me. I know, Master. Giliel puffed up her cheeks and wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes. Although he was dissatisfied, he had to endure it. While Gopril was cleaning herself up with magic, Wuming collected the surviving skywing species. Even though Gawain's self-explosion had forced quite a few people out, there were still close to 1,000 survivors. However, due to their injuries, these skywing species were no longer fit to continue fighting. You guys go back and rest. With that, Wuming gave the order for the gathered skywings to return. Even if it was a servant, its main body would be fine even if it died here. Wuming did not wish to treat the skywing species as a lifeless consumable. Even after transforming into Berserker, the skywings still felt like they were dreaming. Even if it was a dream, Wuming hoped that they would not have a terrible dream this time. Opening the portal, the skywings obeyed the orders of their master, Wuming, and returned to Abenth. As such, only Wuming and Giliel were left here. Giliel, who had finished cleaning herself up, came to Wuming's side. Master, I'm ready. The energetic Giliel was ready to go. Wuming nodded and looked at the gate of the holy city. Let's go. Bedivere should be in trouble. In the mysterious Atlas courtyard, the famous detective Holmes was bringing Chaldea's group to tour the interior of the Atlas courtyard. The strange cross-shaped defense facility made of alchemy materials produced a mechanical sound. On the cross-shaped defense facility, the 4 mechanical tentacles bent, and the mechanical mouth in the center of the cross shot out an energy ray. Bang! However, the ray was blocked by a shield. Ha! Accompanied by the roar of the girl, Flying Dance raised her shield and smashed it on the cross-shaped defense facility. Kacha! Boom! Finally, the cross-shaped defense facility produced a small explosion. The shockwave caused by the explosion was blocked by the giant shield. Master, the last one has been eliminated. Thus, the shield-holding girl reported to her master behind her. Well, it's been hard on you, Matthew, Gadotsi said gratefully. It's what I should do, senior. Matthew smiled, turned the giant shield into a spirit seed, and stood beside Gadotsi. It's been hard on you, Miss Matthew. Although these defense facilities are not strong, they are still a headache for a caster like me. A hearty male voice came from behind, and then Holmes, who was holding a cane and a pipe, appeared. It's normal for this to come from my mouth. You're a detective who knows Baflo. Then, a profiteer-like female voice came from behind Holmes, and then Da Vinci's wife with Mona Lisa's face appeared. A famous detective always has an assistant who can help him, and my combat power is really not high now. Holmes didn't blush at all, took a puff of his pipe, and explained very calmly. Mr. Holmes, Da Vinci's wife. Matthew greeted the two. As expected of Matthew, very polite. It's been hard on you this time, Matthew. Da Vinci also thanked Matthew. Well, there's no need to say polite words. Are we here, Mr. Holmes? Gadotsi looked at Holmes. Well, it's right in front of us. Holmes said. At the entrance of Atlas Yard, Holmes took the initiative to answer the question of why he was there after announcing his real name. Holmes said that as a detective, he had to solve all the mysteries, including the burning of humanity. And in Atlas Courtyard, it was a necessary investigation to solve the puzzle. The main reason why he was here was to meet Chaldea and the others who saw the burning of humanity, which was Gadotsi and the others. After all, they were the only eyewitnesses. As a detective, he naturally needed the testimony of the eyewitnesses. Although Gadotsi and Matthew believed Holmes, Hassan was obviously full of distrust for this inexplicable man. But because Arash and Da Vinci chose to trust him, Hassan could only leave it at that. After all, the other party was here to find Gadotsi and the others, and Gadotsi and the others were willing to believe him. One was willing to be beaten, and the other was willing to be beaten. Hassan didn't have to be stubborn at all. After that, Holmes said that he wanted to take Chaldea and the others to tour Atlas Courtyard, and Da Vinci, who couldn't resist the temptation, immediately agreed. As a last resort, Gurdaz, Mashu, and Leonardo da Vinci followed Holmes into Atlas Academy. As for Hassan and Arash, there was no doubt that they were abandoned. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.